And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
Attention to roll call.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern Time, and of course 5:05 Pacific Coast. Dark, bright, and early. Good morning. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Monday morning, we're swinging back in. We're talking about stop, question, and frisk, or as some like to say, possibly frisk, under Eric Adams. What's going on under Eric Adams? So I think that we should premise this. Well, even before we get into that, I just want to say it was Palm Sunday yesterday. This week is Passover, so blessed to everyone. I hope you spend time with your family, going to church, going to temple. So with that being said, John, I think we should maybe we should explain. There are cops active and retired from the NYPD that are friends and listeners to this show, but we also have people outside this agency and may have different terminology that are law enforcement throughout the country. We have police enthusiasts, and we just have people that watch a podcast. Thank you so much for doing that. So why don't we just premise this with starting to explain what is stop, question, and possibly frisk, and what is the baseline to that?
Sure. So stop, question, frisk is based on a Supreme Court decision, Terry v. Ohio, right? It's a 1968 decision. And so basically when we talk stop, question, and frisk in New York City, that's just what we call it in New York City, right? It's a Terry stop. In other parts of the country, stop, question, and frisk or UF 250 will be called a Terry stop. What is that? What was that decision? I believe it was in Cleveland. Police detective with, I believe he had a long time of experience, maybe like close to 40 years of experience. He sees three men and he believes that they were casing a jewelry store. He saw them pacing back and forth in front of a jewelry store. And he's like, this looks weird. They look like they're going to rob this jewelry store or burglarize it. They look nervous. And he approaches them. When he approaches them, he asks the guy, he walks up to them. He's off duty. He shows them. He walks up to them and he identifies himself. He's like, I'm Detective so-and-so, whatever. And one of the men mumbles something. He gets nervous. In response, he frisks them. He finds a pistol in this guy, Terry's pocket, right? So that's why it's Terry v. Ohio detective versus Terry. And basically the criminal court case goes through and the defense is arguing he had no right to stop and search him. And I think when we look at it on that basis, when we look on the basis of that alone, Terry v. Ohio, I mean, just think about it from the public eye, however you feel about the police, whether you like them or you don't like them. The police officer sitting around, he sees three men pacing back and forth in front of a jewelry store. It's jewelry stores are known to be robbed. They appear to be that they're going to rob it. They appear that they're possibly armed, whether they're grabbing their waistband, they're fixing their waistband, they keep touching their pocket. Usually, criminals, people who are doing something illegal have the, I don't know what to call it, but they have like a little twitch and they'll constantly touch where a gun is or where they have money or where they have the drugs or where they have something they shouldn't have. And that's like pretty much non-seasoned criminals. So, but I think everyone could basically agree is if that a police officer saw that today, they should question that person. And for not only the safety of the police officer, because I think that it gets overused a lot, I think for the safety of the public, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that, yeah, those gentlemen should be easily frisked to ensure that not only the police officer doesn't get shot in his face, but somebody else on the street that day doesn't get shot in their face. So, I mean, that's basically the basis of stop, question, and frisk. I know you're a little bit more well-versed in it, Eric. Is there anything I missed in that?
No, you're pretty much spot on. So I think what's interesting about the case of Terry versus Ohio. So actually, the police officer's name was McFadden, and it was 1968. And the police officer actually encountered John Terry. John Terry was actually a perpetrator, and the defense was that this pat down violated his Fourth Amendment. So what's interesting about that case also is that's a landmark case in this country, right? And it stems back from 1968. I used to actually think it's kind of funny. I would tell people Ray Kelly did not invent stop, question, possible, frisk, right? Because a lot of people have
sold, right?
What's that?
That's how it's sold.
It was sold that way, right? So a lot of people have the ideology that Ray Kelly invented stop, question, possibly frisk. And it actually stems back from 1968. What Ray Kelly did was he realized the significance and importance of this landmark case and how it could be utilized as a crime-fighting tactic. And it's actually brilliant. It's brilliant that we actually hone in and zone in on that landmark case to do policing, which leads into intrusive policing. I always talk about intrusive policing being the bedrock and the fundamentals to public safety. But what's even more interesting about that is the Terry stop, or Terry versus Ohio, whatever terminology you want to use, actually was a landmark case 8 years before People versus DeBoer. And that's a case that allowed police officers to do intrusive police work. We have different encounters, level 1 through level 4. So that's even to me so significant that that case actually was presided on in 1968, and People versus DeBoer was presided on in 1976. And again, it's not something that was presided on or implemented or invented by Ray Kelly. Ray Kelly just utilized it. And this is a nationwide Supreme Court case that all law enforcement agencies use. The problem was that it was such a great idea that the NYPD, of course, they distorted and deteriorated this great usage for policing because they put a number on it. And that's where the NYPD fails, is they put a number, or just as the executive perspective did a great episode and show, and they talked about quotas. They put a quota on it, or a personal objective, or a goal, or the new terminology we now hear, which Marlon definitely highlighted, activity targets. This is where we went wrong. It's a fantastic tool. And what that tool allows is a police officer sees things that others don't see because of the ability, the eye that you get as a police officer, making observations when you encounter potential subjects. If certain crimes, which usually violent felonies, give police officers a limited ability to frisk. And I think that's where people don't understand. There's a difference between frisk and search. A frisk is just that. It's a pat down. It's a limited pat down of someone's outer person to ensure that they are not carrying a firearm. And if a police officer does feel a bulge, which is assimilated to a potential firearm or a knife, that gives the police officer's right to be more intrusive, to now conduct a search of that person to extract that contraband. So absolutely, we should want our police officers doing that. That keeps the police officers safe. Why is that so important? We have to keep the police officers safe in the street legal encounters in order for them to carry out police work to keep the public safe. So it goes hand in hand. And also, it's a fear factor. Yes, we need fear. Some people argue it's a fear factor for the potential perpetrator, the armed perpetrator, to not carry or not be armed because they may encounter an intrusive police officer that understands Supreme Court cases. This Supreme Court case, again, I say it's a landmark case. It's the most significant case to policing, but not invented by Ray Kelly. This has been in effect since 1968. What are your thoughts?
So the reason Ray Kelly and Ray Kelly and Rudy Giuliani, right? Because really they push it on Rudy Giuliani as well. The reason that Ray Kelly and Giuliani get credited with stop, question, and frisk is because they implement the broken windows theory of policing in New York City, right? New York City's crime riddled. There's this theory by these two like college professors or college kids. I don't even remember. I forget their names. I believe they were professors. And basically their theory is that if you allow disorder in neighborhoods, if you allow abandoned buildings to have broken windows, it gives the overall appearance of decay in that area. And that will ultimately lead to more crime. If you go after the people that are breaking the windows and you stop the minor crimes, the major crimes will be prevented. And with that, the use of Terry stops, what the NYPD's policy is known as stop, question, frisk, the report that's utilized to document that at UF 250, what they did is basically push proactive policing in New York City. And when you look at the crime numbers from the time that starts, you literally see a direct correlation with the implementation of broken windows and the use of proactive police work to a major crime drop, not only in New York, but across the whole country. We've had people on here saying, that it was just some phenomenon that crime dropped. But I find it very hard to believe, because when we get to 2018, I believe that gets disproven when we see the legislation, when we see our major city police departments move away from proactive policing, move away from stopping individuals. When you see that, you see a direct correlation with the crime numbers skyrocket. And that happened not only in New York City, but it happened across the country. And this is where we are today. So Eric Adams, very complicated individual, right? Because for 30 years, he made his name for himself going after Rudy Giuliani and Ray Kelly and Bernie Kerik and all these guys that during the height of broken windows, during the height of proactive policing, he was saying that they were doing it wrong. They weren't doing it proper. He was speaking out against quotas. And I do believe that the quota system is what pushed stop, question, and frisk, what pushed that the fervor and the hate against the New York City Police Department in through all these advocacy groups. It basically divided communities, particularly communities of color, with the NYPD. And it was not the practice of stop, question, and frisk. It was the practice of the quota system where NYPD brass, under the direction of the mayoral leadership, Mike Bloomberg, Rudy Giuliani, what they did is they enforced quota numbers. You have to stop 20 people in a month. You have to stop this. You have to stop that. And that was done for commanders to be able to go to Comstat and say, well, I took a crime on 134th Street, but look at all the people we stopped. Look at all the people we stopped, and we tried to prevent, And so they were basically putting dots on the map, and that kind of demonized stop, question, and frisk, and that gave way for politicians like Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams to actually become the mayor. What do you think about the quota system and the 250s?
That's a great question. I think it's terrible. I think this is so for the most part, performance goals, quotas, whatever you want to call it. The whole ideology behind it is terrible, right? You need good leadership, but I think it's much different when you put a quota on summonses or arrests in comparison to stop, question, possibly frisk, because this is just something you cannot put a quota or a performance goal unless you had a magic, unless you had a crystal ball, and we don't, right? And that's the reality. But you can't predict how many people may be suspects in a night, or how many people may be about to commit a crime. You can't. These are impossible things to put a quota and a number. Now, I get it. Don't get me wrong. And before I don't want to get attacked on this by people that are complete, anti-police, but I get the idea of why they thought they had to put a number on it. Because the bottom line is there are cops that are lazy. We say it all the time, right? 10% of the police department does 90% of the work, especially when it comes to intrusive police work, right? Now, most cops, and unfortunately, the overwhelming majority, don't want to engage in intrusive police work or self-initiated police work. And that's what a stop, question, possibly frisk is. It's self-initiated police work, right? Because the reality is if you're not summoned to a 911 call, you're taking part in self-initiated police work, even with the optics that we have now, or back then without the body cameras, even then, it's much more scrutinized than it is if you're summoned to a 911 call. If you're summoned to a 911 call, you have a complainant or a witness who says, hey, that guy robbed me, right? It's much different. So the liability is not on you, the police officer. But when you engage in intrusive police work, the liability and the accountability is completely on you. You have to indicate your encounter with the district attorney and explain start to finish, right? Making sure that you didn't violate someone's Fourth Amendment rights. And that's why now it's getting even more difficult, because with New York City Council, remove some of the parameters for qualified immunity for police officers when it comes to the Fourth Amendment. So that makes it even more difficult for police officers. So Ron Layson says right here, in the height of the 250 era, 250, which is a stop, question, possibly frisk, it's just a term for NYPD forms. There were definitely quotas pushed down by the upper echelon. It was not about quality stops. It was about covering the robbery dots with 250 dots on the map. Now, I understand that also. It's a good point. It's a great point, by the way, because it's such a valuable tool. It's such an invaluable tool that if we have a robbery pattern or a condition in a specific area and we have police officers actually conducting stop, question, possibly frisk, and it's documented on a stop report, a 250, whatever terminology you want to use, that's documentation that we can actually put pins and dots on the map that we can see where are police officers being deployed, where they're encountering gang members, where they're encountering potential subjects, right? And for concept purposes, it's actually something tangible they can look at. But this is the problem with this whole thing is putting a quota on it, create this ideology and ability for this leftist movement to say, hey, the NYPD is racist. Because the fact is that most of the stops conducted were for black and brown. And the reason why is it shows that the police officers were doing their job appropriately by targeting crime ridden areas, places that have a propensity for violence. But what are those neighborhoods? Black and brown, along with the impact zone, right? That's, I think, where I think the height of it was at the Bloomberg era, because of the impact zone is where police officers were deployed, and that was pushed in those areas, is to have those street legal encounters so the numbers get skewed. But again, the question also is, were these stops actually being documented or not properly and appropriately? Was there significant training? Do you think the training for Terry versus Ohio was suffice when it comes to the police department?
No. Although I believe that we received very good training in the 120 because we were trained by experienced anti-crime cops. So, but I don't believe that was citywide. So, you know, when I think when you came out of the academy, I don't think you really understood Terry stop. You understood the case law Terry stop, but you didn't understand the real world Terry stop, right? You knew the case law, but you didn't understand how to apply it. That I believe the hands-on, I believe, is lacking. I believe today it's still lacking. I believe if you go up to cops today, you could get a cop a year on the job, 2 years on the job. You could grab a detective with 2 years on. Ask him what a Terry stop is. Ask him to explain Terry versus Ohio. Ask him to explain when he can stop and frisk you. You know, I don't believe you're going to get a good articulation of it. I'm not saying that they can't do it properly. I'm saying they can't articulate it properly. So maybe they did receive some good training. Maybe they didn't. I don't think that the training's good. G2 training says here, what Ray Kelly did was create an environment where his executives would push 250s for the sake of doing them. Numbers, numbers, and numbers. The CEO of Brooklyn North Anti-Crime, I experienced this firsthand. I believe that's George Misfa, G2 training. We'll have him on here soon, do an interview. But yeah, that's exactly what was going on, you know. But, you know, Pat Donahue brings up an excellent point too. Stop, question, and frisk was a phenomenal law enforcement tool, and it still is, right? Terry, Ohio never got pulled down, you know. Just the NYPD put their own spin on it, you know. Like that's the only thing. The NYPD put all this policy and regulation around it, on top of now City Council weighing in on the how many stops, right? Actually creating law around this. So the insistence of making stop, question, and frisk an activity report data point was the beginning of the anti-police movement in recent times. And that's kind of what happened. We kind of just pushed down as crime fell in New York City, like crime's here, proactive policing's here. And as crime fell, you saw the brass and New York City continue to push for more arrests, more summonses, more stop, question, and frisks, right? So crime's falling. So obviously, when New York's pretty safe, you know, people like, what the hell are you guys doing stopping everybody? Like, you know, I'm out at 3 o'clock in the morning, nothing's even going on. And that is 100% what happened. We pushed, we actually pushed the communities against us. We did. We pushed the youth against us. We created our own enemies. That's what we did. Through the pressure we put on when crime was on the floor, instead of redirecting, instead of refocusing, we just continued to push. And it was a really bad, outdated tactic. And honestly, it's funny because It's what Eric Adams is doing again now, and it's hysterical. So I say he's a complicated figure because I'm going to play a video. This is a Men's Warehouse suit, Eric Adams. This is a chubby Eric Adams. This is this is pre him going to his fancy restaurants. This is pre him hanging out with the Diddy parties. This is pre Eric Adams before he was fancy. So I mean, when I listen to him here, and I think you guys are all going to agree, you're going to say, wow, I kind of agree with him. So this is an old interview. This is him and former Brooklyn District Attorney Charles Hines. They're sitting down, they're having a discussion on local Brooklyn cable TV. This is just a segment I pulled out, but I put on it the basis of this podcast, which is based off an article from the city, which is NYPD stop, question, and frisk surged again in 2024 under Eric Adams. The vast majority of stops, which surged by 50% last year, targeted Black or Latino New Yorkers. And, we often talk about like the basis of legislation in New York City, and everything's, if it's being done disproportionately against Black and brown people, then we have to pull it down because it's racist. And that's the thing that Eric Adams weighed in on for 30 years when he demonized the NYPD. Oh, they're targeting Black and brown New Yorkers, claiming that because of that, the NYPD is racist. So this is State Senator Eric Adams, who would be in direct opposition of New York City Mayor Eric Adams. So listen to what he has to say here, Eric. The whole interview is good. It's not that long. You can probably find it on YouTube. But it's here's just a segment of it.
And that's when we went off track with the stop and frisk program. It's not the good stop when you see someone that you believe is committing or has committed a crime, or when you're looking for a crime pattern in a particular area. The bad stops, which are the overwhelming number of stops, is when you tell an officer at the beginning of the night, you will come in with 10 stop and frisk, no matter if the person did a crime or not. And many officers are upset over this. So the quota-driven system of the process is what's hurting the process.
And you've recommended police officers give a identification card to someone who stopped.
Well, that was one of my colleagues, Jamani Williams. That was a bill that he proposed in the city council. I support that concept. I support also giving the people some form of receipt. I think we have to start identifying those officers who are abusing the process and those supervisors who are having officers abuse the process, because officers don't want to do this. Officers that I know and that I've policed with, they want to go out and catch bad people. They want to catch people who commit predatory crime like rape and robbery and burglary. They don't want to harass innocent citizens. That is not what we go into policing for. And if you would speak with the countless number of officers, they'll tell you the same thing.
What do you think about Men's Warehouse Eric Adams?
So I thought we might go more into the training, but I think you brought up some great points that we have to talk about, and also with this video, right? Because the bottom line is, when Eric Adams saying it does, he's not wrong. He's obviously right. It's a true statement that to tell the cops, hey, that you have to get 10 stop, question, possibly frisk reports, or you have 250s, whatever. The bottom line is that you have to have 10 encounters where someone you suspect may have committed crime, is about to commit a crime, or did commit a crime is an impossible thing unless you had a crystal ball. So to put a number is putting a lot of stress on the cops. Is just not feasible, and that's where we went wrong. So he's absolutely right. Now, did he ever engage in a stop, question, possibly frisk encounter himself in his career? I highly doubt it, with 9 arrests. But he's not wrong. But where he's wrong, and it's not in this footage, is when Eric Adams talks about how the stop, question, and frisk tool, invaluable tool, is racist, and how it targets Black and brown. And that's where the lie is. It does not target Black and brown. It targets specific crime areas. It targets areas that would have crime trends, crime patterns, areas that have a high propensity for violence. And unfortunately, those areas are Black and brown. It's not something we like to hear, but it's the reality. and that's why the numbers get so skewed. But putting a quote on it destroyed an awesome, invaluable Supreme Court case that is a landmark case for this entire country. I really think that the stop, question, possibly frisk, or Terry versus Ohio really changed the game of policing that segued into intrusive policing early on before the Giuliani era. It's just that Giuliani utilized that with the broken windows theory, put that all together and stemmed into the Bloomberg era to make New York City a better place. And it's no coincidence that this didn't just happen. It wasn't potluck. This is good policing. It's good crime fighting tactics. But there has to be a correlation. That's why I think it's a great point that you brought up, John. We can't say in New York City that, hey, crime is down. We have less firearms being carried by, excuse me, by potential perpetrators in the street, that we have less crimes being committed. It's a safer place. And yet the amount of encounters of stops goes up, because I believe the encounters, the street legal encounters, do correlate to what the crime is in the streets, which is where we segue into what's going on now. The stops are astronomical right now under Mayor Eric Adams, because that's where the lie is. He's telling the public that their perception of crime is absolutely wrong. They're saying that crime is down. Well, if crime is down, why are the stops so high? The stops are high because there's so many illegal firearms in the street. The stops and the encounters right now, the numbers are high because crime is high. So I agree. I think you brought up a fantastic point, John, is that we can't, and that was where the problem was, is that as crime was coming down, they were still, and when I say they, the upper echelon of the NYPD was still pushing numbers on arrest, summonses, and ultimately stop, question, possibly frisk. And that's where I think things really started to get distorted, and the eye really started to get scrutinized for the NYPD, is that how could these stops and the numbers of stops increase if crime is going down? If it's a safer place and there are less perpetrators, and the perpetrators were facing more substantial sentences for carrying a illegal firearm, then why would we need so many substantial stops?
Yeah. So I mean, and the thing that like freaks me out is when I listen to Eric Adams, is I'm like, when I listen to him there, is like, I'm like, yeah, I don't think he's saying anything wrong in that one little segment. I don't agree when you just throw race in there, unless we're talking crime numbers, we're talking demographics of the neighborhoods they're occurring in. If you're just using the race card without giving supportive data as to why it's racist, you already lost me. Like, we're not having a real conversation. You're just looking for inflammatory points without even, well, what neighborhood did it occur in? What's the population like in that neighborhood? What's the demographics look like in that neighborhood? Who commits the most crimes in that neighborhood? What are the demographics of the perpetrator? Like, unless we're talking about that, I'm not engaging in that conversation, because it's literally a low information. This is how I feel, but what he says about, the quotas, and what he says about pushing numbers, it's like bad stops. He's against bad stops. I think all cops are really against bad stops. Unfortunately, they get bullied into making them. And under Eric Adams, they get bullied into making them. And who's getting stopped? Who's getting stopped? Let's talk about it. The stops, a lot of the stops today are worse than they, we had the Federal Monitor report, I believe it was last year, and, they actually documented the stops were, almost all of them were unconstitutional. And they were way worse than the height of the Giuliani era. So when you look at that and you're like, well, for somebody who was supposed to be a reformer, you didn't reform anything. You came in and you're using the same tactics of your predecessor that you demonized. So in 2024, according to the city, officers recorded 25,386 stops, a 50% increase from the year prior, and the highest number since 2014. 9 in 10 people stopped by the NYPD last year were Black and Latino. So according to State Senator Eric Adams, New York City Mayor Eric Adams and his NYPD are racist. They're performing bad stops. Before we go any further in this article, there was a 50% increase in stop, question, and frisks last year. Do you believe that their officers feel more empowered under Eric Adams and chief of department, now chief of department John Schell, and former chief of department Jeffrey Madry, and deputy mayor of public safety Kaz Daughtry. Do you feel cops feel more empowered to go out and do police work today, or do you feel like this was driven non-organically by supervisors pushing numbers? And based upon, we talk to police officers every day. What do you believe accounts for this 50% increase?
So I think it's a conglomerate of issues, right? So for one, I think it's definitely activity targets or performance goals being pushed by this upper echelon. I think they're pushing for numbers. There's no doubt about it. We say numbers for numbers. I think when it comes to numbers, I think this administration is pushing numbers far more than their predecessors. I also think that it's also a conglomerate of this idea that Eric Adams sold to the public that no longer do we have anti-crime, and we don't have these jump out boys in plainclothes, that we're going to do intrusive police work the right way, and we're going to have these quasi uniforms. However, it completely fails on its face, because there are plenty of good police officers right now. There are outliers out there doing intrusive police work, but there are some police officers that don't have the experience to do it, and they don't have the leadership in these units. And there are more. To me, it's ironic, and it's a complete paradox that under Eric Adams, there are far more intrusive police units than there were before. We disbanded anti-crime, and we replaced it with public safety teams, which are cops in uniform in precincts throughout the city doing anti-crime work, but in actual full uniform. Then we have neighborhood safety teams. We have cops doing anti-crime in a quasi-type anti-crime uniform. It's pretty much the same thing as a uniform without their nameplate, without the patches on the side of the shirt. And then in addition to that, we have an entire unit known as the community response team or citywide response team, whatever you want to call them, in khaki pants throughout the city doing intrusive police work. Now, what does that also say? It also correlates that because crime is high right now, and it's not down, as they say, it's a complete lie, that there are more stops being conducted because crime is so high. And how do we know? Eric Adams tells the public all the time. The proof is in the pudding. His success, he touts, is how many illegal firearms have been retrieved under his administration, under this police department as we speak. And the cops are doing a good job. They're doing the job as it's catered to, as what the crime trends are. So we have more stops, and we have more removal of illegal firearms. So it correlates together. And the appearance is that if Eric Adams speaks on his ideology that he said before in the past, that it is disproportionate and unfairly targets black and brown, then Eric Adams is racist. But again, I'll say Eric Adams, when it comes to this, it's not a racist plan. I almost feel like I'm defending him, but I'm not. But the reality is that the stops are up significantly because he's trying to conduct intrusive police work with all these quasi-type anti-crime groups because crime is so high. And the reality is, where is crime high? In black and brown neighborhoods. We don't like saying it, but that's the truth.
Yeah, and so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the NYPD is racist. I'm saying according to State Senator Eric Adams, I'm just using the basis of what State Senator Eric Adams said. So if you look at the chart I have up here, you see in the Blasio eras, in 2018, there were 11,000 stops performed, right? In 2019, there were 13,000 stops performed. In 2020, there were 9,000. In 2021, there were 8,000. So now here comes in, those are the last 4 years of the Blasio administration. Here's the first 3 years of the Adams administration. So Adams comes in, the stops double immediately in 2022. They go to 15,000. In 2023, they have about the same thing, about 16,000. And, I think you could look at those stops doubling just based upon the CRT and the neighborhood safety teams. And there was more of a push to do proactive police work again. We saw with the car pursuits, there was definitely a push. Again, they used untrained young rookies to do this, which is a problem. And I think that's why you see a lot of these stops are bad. A lot of the stops, when you look at the Federal Monitor reports, when you look at any reports about the stops themselves, you see that the stops just aren't up to snuff, and the cops really aren't able to articulate. And you see a lot of that too with the arrests too. There's a lot of good arrests that are made that are being thrown out because of the inability to draw up. So now in 2024, 25,000 last year in 2024, 25,386 arrests were 358 stops were performed. Now, but like take that to under Michael Bloomberg, right? I mean, we have to be fair to Eric Adams, although he's doubled almost, from the start of his tenure, and he was pushing for good stops, supposedly. So that's what State Senator Eric Adams said. And if you're going, and if it's mainly against black and brown people, you're racist, but it's still mainly against black and brown people. So I don't know. So I don't know what to make of that. I don't know how State Senator Eric Adams or New York City Mayor Eric Adams could correlate that now. But under Mike Bloomberg, the highest record stops, 2011. You ready for this? 685,724 stops. So, I mean, to be fair to Eric Adams and to be fair to the NYPD, I mean, we're talking a very small percentage of stops are being performed as opposed to the height of the broken windows under Mike Bloomberg, the height of stop question for 685,724 stops in 2011.
So I think that's a great point that you said. So even to piggyback on that even more, I think what's important to look at. So the stops are so significant now in comparison to what year? And that was 2014. Why is 2014 so important? Who becomes mayor in 2014? Former Mayor Bill de Blasio. So I think it's important to look at that, right? Because I think a lot of the critics of the police department, a lot of the critics of intrusive police work, a lot of the critics of stop, question, possibly frisk, or Terry stops, whatever you want to call it, indicate, and we had this conversation with Edwin Raymond here several times, that stop, question, and frisk is not really the bread and butter to policing. And some will argue, and it's a good argument, but I think I have an argument for this also. So some will argue that during the tenure of former Mayor Bill de Blasio, that the crime rates were pretty good, and there was less stops conducted, less intrusive police work. And there is some truth to that, right? But with that truth, we have to examine. Yes, under former Mayor Bill de Blasio, the stops were conducted at a much a lesser rate. The street legal encounters did decrease. I seen it myself. So did you, John. We were still employed by the police department. I saw the police officers that were hired in that era were still working right now. Did not have that same style of policing as we did when we came on the job in 2004 and 2005, the impact era. Different style of policing. So I think the reason for that is, I think the reason why crime was not rising so significantly under former Mayor Bill de Blasio is because a lot of these violent and these volatile and predicate felons in New York City were put in jail under the police department working for Mayor Michael Bloomberg. So when former Mayor Bill de Blasio came to office, he had as I like to call, a turnkey operation, right? Or many people, when you buy a business that is a turnkey operation, that means that you don't have to make any changes. That business just keeps going. So for former Mayor Bill de Blasio, things were going in good place. And a lot of these violent perpetrators were in jail. And if you look in New York State, the average person that has taken the life of someone else does 7 years in jail. So a lot of these perpetrators were in jail. So by the time they started to come out of jail for various crimes was towards the end of the tenure of former Mayor Bill de Blasio. So I think these are the things that were held on. So now we're in the Eric Adams era where they're actually utilizing this tool. A lot of these perpetrators are back in the street. Of course, I will support them and say, yes, you have bail reform and these other crazy legislation that hurts. So the reality is the police officers, they're doing their job. They're doing their job as asked and as paid and trained to do.
So 2013, right? Bill de Blasio steps in. New York federal judge ruled the practice was ineffectual, and it violated the constitutional rights of minorities. I don't know how it just violated the rights of minorities. And, Bill de Blasio and his corporation counsel had every right to appeal it, but they did not. Because, that election, if you guys remember, was who hates the police most? Who does not like the NYPD? That's who was running for mayor. And that was all brought forth again by the misuse of stop and frisk. I truly believe that. I believe if it wasn't for the misuse and stop, question, and frisk, Bill de Blasio never becomes the mayor. You get a moderate like a Thompson or somebody like that steps in. You get like a moderate Democrat, somebody that's has a common sense platform in public safety, fiscally responsible. You're not going to get somebody as far left as a Bill de Blasio or as an Eric Adams. And you got to think to like their campaigns, right? And that's why I call them far left, because they are. I think the only difference that I could ever spot in Eric Adams' campaign versus a far left Democrat socialist is his ties to Israel. Other than that, I don't see any difference between an Eric Adams wanting open borders, wanting illegals to vote in New York City elections, wanting to give them health care, wanting to fire you if you don't put something in your body, wanting you to show your private medical data to go to after school activities, be able to eat, be able to work, be able to travel. So I think, both of those people, they never come into power if not for the misuse of stop, question, and frisk. So that judge rules. I don't believe that judge was proper. I believe that if New York City appealed that, they would have won. And stop, question, and frisk would have continued. But because of that ruling, stop, question, and frisk on paper was stopping to be used, right? So Mayor Bill de Blasio's final year in office, NYPD officers conducted just 8,947 stops. Now, I'm just going to sit there and say, I by this time I was already super hyper focused on the politics in New York City and what was happening. And you could go back, you could ask my guys, you could ask my young guys. When Bill de Blasio came in about 2014, 2015, I told them, I said, it's over. Stop doing anti-crime. You go to long-term investigations if you want to do this type of work, because this is not the job. The city does not want this type of work anymore. But the work was still being done. And what was happening is cops were still stopping people and they were still doing their job. Right? All of these decriminalization laws were passed in city council. This progressive legislation, this pro-criminal registration, anti-police legislation was coming in both at the state level and at the city level, hot and heavy. But I don't believe that the NYPD just backed off of that. You still had anti-crime teams going out there every night. You still had narco teams. You still had gang. You still had all of these units going out and doing the same job. And in my opinion, they just weren't documenting. They were just putting their careers on the line. And that's the only thing I think that happened in the Bill de Blasio years. So I don't, and then while at the same time, and I'm talking about guys like you, Eric, you stayed doing this work till 2021, 2022. I'm talking about guys that came out with us, the little guys that came out after us. They continued to do this work while at the same time bringing in new guys that were untrained, that didn't know how to do this work, didn't want to do this work, were told not to do the work in the academy, and basically through attrition, they got rid of anti-crime and proactive police work. But I do believe, like when they report these numbers, I don't believe that those numbers are anywhere near accurate. What do you think about that? Was that work still being done under Bill de Blasio?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe the overwhelming majority of the police department wasn't doing that type of work, especially when it came to the backbone of police department, which is patrol, right? So the patrol officers, the overwhelming majority, have geared away from that style of policing. Also, they kind of had no choice also to gear away from it, right? Because they implemented what was called the neighborhood coordination officer program, right? So with the neighborhood coordination officer program, that took a lot of the manpower from patrol to create this this type of style of policing. What was the neighborhood coordination officer program? For the active police officers know what it is. Maybe some of the retired guys might not know exactly how it works, or law enforcement agencies throughout the country, or just people that watch. So the neighborhood coordination officer program was where officers would get assigned a specific beat or a specific post. Some of the retired guys may know it as CPOP. It was the same horse, just a different color, something the police department does. As we see the pendulum change within different administrations, we see the same thing, just painted differently. Just as we see right now with Jessica Tisch, they implemented Q teams. It's just a rebrand of CRT. It's also a rebrand and of conditions, right, of doing intrusive police work. So, with that being said, it did draw away police officers from doing patrol, because police officers were assigned, if they were in transit or housing or in a precinct, specific areas to get to know the community, go to community meetings, to have less engagement with the public with these street legal encounters. So the patrol officers had less time to actually engage the public, and they were responding more to 911 calls. But the anti-crime guys are absolutely right. And I was doing anti-crime myself. We're still doing intrusive police work. Again, it goes back to 10% of the job. There's 90% of that type of work. Absolutely. And I think that's where the problem is. And that's where we really missed the march on. And that's what the shame of a stop, question, and possibly frisk encounter that actually correlates to a documentation of a stop report, a 250, whatever you want to call it, is a good thing. It's a good thing to document it, because it's almost as if, Eric Adams talks about giving someone a receipt. I always said that is the receipt. The stop report, the 250, is a receipt. That is a legal doctrine where you document and said, hey, rhetorically speaking, if I'm doing police work and I stop John McCary, I stopped him, whether it was forcible or verbal encounter, and I stopped him, and I had an encounter to determine if he committed a crime or if he was about to, and it was a legal stop. When I document it, that should be something that is utilized in qualified immunity, right? My defense is, right, that I utilize the Fourth Amendment to help in public safety as a government official doing police work. And here's my receipt. That's a stop report to say, hey, I had an encounter, rhetorically speaking, with John McCary. I suspected he had a firearm, and I checked him. And here it is, proving that I had this encounter. And I am protected as the police officer because it's a good encounter. And this person, if they do make a complaint, that, hey, I have this documentation. And so you're absolutely right. And Ron Layson said it here earlier. It led to more CCRBs for police officers having encounters on body camera where they did not document it on a stop report. Because a stop report, and this is where the failure of the leadership of the NYPD is, the stop report became this bad thing, right? It's like, because it's so scrutinized. And it got so scrutinized to the minutia of a stop. That's where we went wrong also. And I used to argue this when it came to these stops. You cannot tell a police officer what they feel, what they saw, or what they heard. And when it came to this federal monitor, they made a lot of mistakes when it came to these stop reports, saying, well, you didn't see that, or you didn't hear that, or you didn't feel that. You can't tell that police officer. But yes, at the same token, the failure was the articulation in the way the police officers explained it, because the police officers documented it in cop language. And the federal monitor, one of these things documented in plain English. And that's where the failure is. The leadership of the police department should have taught the cops how to write it and transition it for the view of the federal monitor.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many things were happening at that time, and you got to think, like, there was a lot of 250s that just, there were a lot of stop, question, and frisk reports that were written that weren't even stop, question, and frisk, right? I used to do it all the time. I did it all the time in anti-crime. I actually, when I was a sergeant, I trained my guys to do it too. It's kind of hard to articulate a Terry stop. Right. It depending the situation. Situations are so fluid. No two stops are the same. They're not textbook. It's never textbook. The environment different. The area is different. The clothing's different. The information you have is different. The whatever you want to say. The crime trends in each location are different. Right. That in specific settings. Maybe there's buses or trains in the area. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there's an influx of so like each stop is unique. So what I always trained like my guys on, and it was something that I did, was to use minor crimes, right? When we're watching somebody, get them on something. Wait for him to light a joint. Wait for him to litter. Wait for him to do jaywalk. Wait for something that we could actually have a stop. So if your suspicion is wrong, right? Even though we were rarely wrong, but if it is, we have the ability now to detain while we wait to get further information, right? While you're sitting back and watching somebody, we used the minor crimes to do that, right? So, and now that kind of circumvented stop, question, and frisk, because once you commit a crime, you have probable cause to be detained. You could summons in lieu of arrest, or you could arrest, detain, summons later, right? And so, you could 100% circumvent that. And that was also used a lot in the NYPD. And there were 250s written based upon probable cause stops. Those are not 250 stops. And there was a lot of those. It wasn't just us doing it. I mean, I was trained that way too. So a lot of the stops were that too. And that was a big reason that the city council continues till today to go after minor crimes, because they removed the NYPD's ability to actually fight crime. They removed the NYPD's ability to make those probable cause stops. They just take probable cause away from you, right? So there's a huge push legally to stop the NYPD's ability from stopping you in the street. Now, I'm definitely, the more I think about my political leanings, I'm probably more of a libertarian than anything. And I agree that I don't want to be walking down the block, and I don't want some dumb cop just coming up to me and be like, get up against the wall and I'm going to frisk you. I agree with that. I think there should be standards. We have constitutional rights in this country. But at the same time that this is being painted, that this is going on, I don't believe that's actually what was happening in New York City. Are there some bad stops? Yeah, I've seen them. I think we've all seen them. We've seen some bad stops, but most of the time, I believe there is an articulable reason to stop somebody. I do. And when I say bad stops, I don't mean that they were necessarily a bad stop, but they were documented and articulated poorly, the stop. Because I do believe that, I don't think, like this chart that's up now, 9 and 10 people stopped by the NYPD are Black and Latino. Like, oh yeah, the cops are just like, yeah, let's stop that Black kid or that Hispanic kid right there. That's not what's going on. Like, let's not play games here. Like, what's happening is a cop thinks that they saw something, or that somebody's doing something, or they did something, a crime, and they're stopping them. Why is it Black and Latino people more? Right? Why? That is the conversation. Is it because the NYPD is racist? I don't know. A majority minority police department. Are they enforcing a racist system? A systemically racist system and a systemically racist law enforcement organization? I don't think so, Eric. Like, I'm going to sit here and say that the NYPD is the furthest thing from racist. I don't believe so at all. I don't believe these stops are race-based at all. I believe this is just another inflammatory talking point that's been used for the last 30 years. This created Eric Adams, this talking point. This got him all the way up to the seat of the mayor. And now here he is, and he's being accused of the same thing that he propelled himself off of. What do you think about this talking point right here? Like, 9 in 10 people stopped are Black and Latino.
Well, there's no surprise, right? We said it, 96 to 99% of the crime is committed by Black and brown. 96 to 90% of the gang members are Black and brown. So the police officers are doing their job appropriately. There's no race factor in it. They're doing it according to the crime trends. But even with that, even with the crime rise that we have under Eric Adams, even though lie to the public that crime is down, that's a complete lie. Crime is up. But even with that, there's actually not that many stops if you look at it. So I think we had said with this article, I think it was about 25,000 stops. So there's in a city of 8.5 million people, with millions of tourists every year, I think the stops are actually pretty low. I think that's less than 1% of the population was actually stopped under Terry versus Ohio. So it's just another lie that they want to perpetuate to the public. So I'm glad that you brought up city council and legislation when it comes to this Supreme Court case, right? So what do we see? We see the city council, we see Jumaane Williams, the public advocate, stripping away at the police department, chipping away from actually doing police work. So you're right. So for many police officers, their encounters do start at what's level 4, probable cause, right? You have 4 different levels of intrusion in people versus the board. So level 4 is probable cause. So how do they chip away at probable cause? You're exactly right. Remove the tools that anti-crime and intrusive police work utilize to lead to these bigger crimes, such as illegal firearms. What is an example of that? What is something that was removed? Jaywalking, right? Now, do police officers go out and look for jaywalkers and write those kind of summonses? No, they want to utilize this idea, but it is a great tool, as we have said in a prior podcast. If there are 20 known gang members jaywalking across a street, and the opposite side of the street is a rival gang location, that would be a great tool to have those encounters at level 4 probable cause that may lead to illegal firearms. Now, level 3, which is a Terry stop, that legislation is chipping away at by saying it's racist to stop police officers from having these encounters. And how do we chip even further, John? The How Many Stops Act. The How Many Stops Act targets the first 2 levels when it comes to people versus the board. Level 1 is a request for information. And level 2 is the common law right of inquiry. Just having encounters with people, conversations that are not stops. You're not detaining someone. You're just engaging them. As a police officer, I would say it, right? We talked about it on a prior podcast, many podcasts. That shield that you wear in your chest, that's what separates you from a security guard. That gives you the right to do intrusive police work. But the legislation, the New York City Council, has chipped away at every level. They chipped it at level 4, chipped it at level 3, and now they chipped at level 1 and 2, which is the How Many Stops Act, which you have to document every encounter. So if someone is looking around in a big city and they're lost, what would be a normal conversation, right? Because you need objective reason to approach when it comes to level 1. For a police officer to say, hey, you lost, right? That is a request for information. And so, yeah, I'm lost. I know where I'm going. That's a normal conversation. But according to Jumaane Williams with the How Many Stops Act, that would be a documentation to document that encounter, the gender of that person, and the race and the ethnicity of that person, because you have an encounter. What is level 2? You have a conversation with someone. You ask incriminating questions because there's some founded suspicion, which may lead to an actual Terry stop to actually detain someone against their will under the 4th Amendment. So that's what they did. They chipped away at every level, every intrusive level for police officers to actually help public safety. So ask yourself, who are you voting for out there? Because these people have chipped away from the police department from doing their job. And I think John is spot on. I want to piggyback. And that's where the problem is. A lack of training. Training should be constant. I used to train my guys constantly, and I'm not trying to brag, but we were the best when it came to stop, question, and possibly frisk and understanding Supreme Court cases because we constantly trained it. Constantly, we went over the same thing over and over, and 1,000 times we would go over the case, and I would still find things like, wow, something I didn't notice before because there's just so many details. And I think that's what happens. And rhetorically speaking, let's say you have an adversary in the street just having a conversation with someone. Let's say there is a request for information. Say, hey, buddy, okay, you lost? And what if the guy, he gets nervous and he flicks his belt and a bag of crack falls out? Well, that's probable cause. That person's under arrest. And unfortunately, because of lack of training, because of quotas, there are many cops who would have prepared a stop, question, and frisk report saying, I stopped to detain this person. In reality, you did not. You just had a conversation under intrusive police work, and that person got nervous and threw a bag of crack on the floor, and you had probable cause. So I think that's where the problem comes in, is did we document when we were supposed to? And sometimes cops documented when they were not supposed to, and they actually documented a stop, but they never actually detained anyone.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, Pat Donahue talks in here. 1997, the UF 250 report actually called for the MOS, which is a member service, to write out and articulate the reason for the stop. The department quickly revised the report to a checkbox format to minimize the scrutiny. And honestly, I don't blame the department for doing that for the sake of saving time. Because like I said, these stops are very involved. They're very intricate. And there are stops I have that if you wanted me to articulate them, I'm going to write you like a 4-page essay. And you know what? And of course, the scrutiny is going to be there on the stop. And I think, people just, it's a hard concept to understand. It is. It's like, what and it's definitely the freedom versus safety argument. Oh, this is America. The cops shouldn't stop you, blah, blah, blah. But like when you're looking at it from a police perspective, or you're looking at it from a public safety perspective, or you're looking at it from a member of the community complaining about a crimes perspective, there has to be a balance to this, I just want to walk you through a stop I had, and it was so heavily scrutinized. End of the day, the district attorney did draw up the case, but I literally fought with the sergeant, the platoon commander, the district attorney, the chief at the bureau at the district attorney's office. And it's like, this is a stop in New York City. So I'm doing anti-crime. It's about 2:00 in the morning. There's no buses or trains in the area. I'm in a residential neighborhood. And I see a young man walking with 2 laptop bags. Not one, but 2. I'm in this big maroon Crown Victoria. It's clear as day that it's an unmarked car, right? You got 2 bald guys with tattoos in the car. Obviously, we're anti-crime. It's 2:00 in the morning. I look to my right. I'm in a residential neighborhood. I see this kid walking with 2 laptop bags in a neighborhood where there are car break-ins. I don't say a word to the kid. I don't say boo. He looks at me and he runs and he jumps in a bush. And I'm like, stop the call. Right? Do I have the right to stop him at that point, Eric?
Absolutely, no doubt about it. Absolutely, hands down. And I'm sure you met a lot of opposition.
So I walk over. I carefully, because now I don't know that this kid doesn't have weapons. I don't know what the hell is going on. I walk over. I see where his legs are under the bush. I shine the flashlight. I pull him out from the bush. I'm like, hey, what are you doing, bro? I live here. I'm like, you live here? He's like, yeah. I'm like, why'd you run and jump in the bush for? I got scared when I seen you. I didn't know who you were. I thought you were going to rob me. I'm like, okay. I said, where are the laptop bags that you had? I didn't have any laptop bags. Now he lies to me, right? He told me he lives there. Told me he has laptop bags. He didn't have no laptop bags. I clearly seen him. So he lied. So now I'm raised up, right? I knock on the door of the home while we have him detained. Old man comes to the door. It's late. He's in shock. I said, do you have anyone else live here? Do you have a son or anything? No, nobody lives here. I said, do you know this gentleman right here? He says he lives here. Never seen this guy before in my life. No problem. Completely lying, right? Now I have probable cause. I have reasonable suspicion that he has stolen goods. The laptops are stolen. I go to the bush that he says that he didn't have the laptop bags. I take the laptop bags. I look at the laptop bags. And one of the laptop bags has a logo of a car that I know, of a commercial vehicle that I know is not too far, that parks on this block just because of my knowledge of the neighborhood there. I keep him detained. I go to where that vehicle is. Sure enough, the interior light of that vehicle's on, the doors are open. I ascertain inside of the vehicle the address of where the person lives. I knock on the door. I go, excuse me, sir, do you own the car? Yes, I do. I said, could you go inside and tell me if anything's missing? He's like, yeah, I'm missing my laptop and I'm missing another laptop. Now I have the stuff. I take the pictures. He identifies them. I have it I have this kid at probable cause at this point that he has criminal possession of stolen property. Right? I can't charge him with the actual theft, but just the possession at this point. He later on, he goes back, he writes a confession after I read him his Miranda, all that stuff. And this, you got to think, is 2008. And everyone said that was a bad stop. And I'm like, these are the stops. Imagine trying to document that on a 250 report.
It's one of the most complex things to actually articulate your police work. It's almost like, I would actually sit down with my guys and sometimes say, okay, we have to reverse engineer this, because sometimes after an incident, all those great factors, all these observations that you made, putting pen to paper is so difficult. So it's almost like you have to backtrack. Okay, we have this person under arrest and go back to what we saw at the beginning. It's a lot. It's really tough to articulate and, using that word to articulate, but to explain that, hey, you're doing police work and you see someone run into the bushes, it's odd, right? But putting pen to paper is very tough. Also, when we talk about, this is where I think the police department went wrong. And I get it. It goes back to what Ron Layson said. They wanted documentation. They wanted something tangible so they could put dots on a map, right? They really should have preached the case of People versus DeBoer rather than just the Terry stop. But the reason why they pushed the Terry stop is because there's documentation. And what is People versus DeBoer? It's intrusive police work, right? It should preach the encounters. And I would say, like, one of the most common themes that I would see in the South Bronx or working the Lower East Side or the 112 precinct is intrusive police work that doesn't require documentation. John, probably something you saw also. Many of our active retired cops know exactly what I'm talking about. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're working in December, January. It's freezing out. And what do I see often, right? In the South Bronx or anywhere where there's commercial locations. You would see at 2 in the morning, it's below freezing temperatures. And sometimes you see maybe 2, 3 guys, right? And for me, honestly, let's be honest, I worked in predominantly black neighborhoods. I would see 3 male blacks in freezing temperatures standing in front of a store with the gate down that's been closed for hours, just standing there. Now, if I stop to have a conversation with them, is that racist or is that good police work? Now, is that stopping them? No. If there's three males, persons of interest, standing in front of a store with the gate down and it's closed and it's freezing temperatures, we should want our police officers to engage them. What are they doing there? What do you think they're doing there? You think they're enjoying the weather? It's freezing out. I used to let me tell you something. I used to say all the time. I used to tell some of these subjects that I arrested, they would have been made awesome police officers. These guys would stand the post in freezing temperatures and stand out there more hours than some of the police officers and not complain. So, but that's something where we should engage people. That's called the common law right of inquiry, right? Especially if you work in your area, you know that drugs are being sold, you know what's going on in that area. There's 3 guys standing in front of a store with the gate down at 2 in the morning and it's freezing. They're not standing there to have a conversation, have a good time. So that's what we should want our police officers to engage. Hey, what's going on? What are you guys doing here? Asking questions that to incriminate themselves. That's what level 2 is under the How Many Stops Act. It's to get people to incriminate themselves so that you have the right to detain them, which could lead to an arrest. That is good police work. But what happens? Many times police officers engage 3 potential subjects standing in front of a gate with the gate closed and it's freezing, and they would have just maybe a conversation. That conversation may be enough for those 3 subjects to go home for the night and not sell drugs or not have any crimes that night, but they would document a stop report saying that they detained the person because of a quota. In reality, they never actually forcibly stopped them. They engaged them into a conversation under People versus the Board.
But now under the How Many Stops Act, you have to document that, right? Even though it's just a common law right of inquiry, and that's the thing. It's like, do you want cops to ask these questions? Do you want cops to do this type of work? Because I'm like city council completely confuses me, because the same progressives that want to strip police officers' ability to do anything are the same council members that complain that the NYPD doesn't do anything. So it's like it boggles my mind. And then, like, to me, again, I really didn't even care what the stop, question, and frisk decision, because I was like, I just do everything based upon probable cause anyway. And then I mean, it would have played into this that other convoluted story that I just told you. But like, it just shows how complicated each one of these stops are and how each one of these are very different. But I think I think the stops should be made when you don't have a choice. And when we pulled away from plainclothes anti-crime work, I think that's a big problem. And I think that actually leads to more stops. I mean, because traditionally we would watch people. I mean, I think we watched more people than we ever stopped. Right? Like, we just people watch. That's what the hell we did. Sit back. What is this guy doing? What are those three guys doing in front of the store? And then we're sitting there. This one, maybe he's doing this. Maybe he's doing that. Maybe he's doing this. And, you know, and so my question for like all city council and all these progressive anti-police people, or the people that want to strip the NYPD of all of this thing, is like, is that wrong? Is that wrong to have cops see something that doesn't fit the baseline? 3 or 4 kids walking around a freezing night in the middle of the cold, standing in front of location, possibly casing victims. Is that wrong? Is it wrong for us to watch them? Is it wrong for us to try to stop crime? And, you know, and I don't know anyone disagrees with that. Like, I just think, like, we never get down to the minutia of any of this, and it really needs to be brought up. A story I told a while back. I don't want to tell too long stories, but like, I think it's important because we talk about stop, question, and frisk. We talk about people don't want to get stopped. We talk about black and brown people. We talk about racial profiling. I think it comes into play. We were getting robberies of Asian women up on 8th Avenue in Brooklyn. I'm on 39th Street and 8th Avenue in Brooklyn. On the 7-2 side, I see a woman walking, Asian woman, very pretty. I can tell she has money. She has like a Louis bag. She's walking with her phone. And I had been watching these 3 Hispanic kids literally follow people. Like, they were about to rob and do a purse snatch or a phone snatch on people. And I'm like, they're going to do it. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. Right. And I had been watching them case people. And every time either a marked car would pass by or anybody would come on the block, they would turn around, go the other way, and go back to where they were standing, which was in a location where there weren't businesses. It was more of a industrial part of 8th Avenue. And the other businesses had closed already. And so this woman comes walking past these 3 individuals that we had been watching for a while sitting in a car that we had dressed up as like a Mexican cab with heavily tinted out. And as the woman's walking, they start to run up on her. And the kid I'm with throws the car and drive, and whoom, right? They turn and they stop. I place them up all against the wall. Get on the effing wall, blah, 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 blah. I frisk all of them right then and there. I perform a stop, question, and frisk. I mean, I believe I had reasonable suspicion at that point. I definitely didn't have probable cause at that point. But I think that if city council looked at that stop and that stop, question, and frisk, they would say that that's a terrible stop and that's a bad stop. What do you think about that stop, Eric? Like, I'm watching these people case women, solo women walking, and I see them about to run up on this woman. They're literally running. They're going to do a snatch on her, and they hear the engine, and they turn and they stop. When I stop them later, it turns out they don't know where they are. They live in Harlem. They're miles and miles away from 8th Avenue in Brooklyn, and they have no idea where they are. Each one of them tells us a different story about why they're there. They completely lie to us. I basically 250 them and send them on their way. But what do you think about that stop? Is that good police work, or was that something that city council would say I targeted brown people?
No, first of all, it's awesome police work, and that's my argument. I'm so glad that you brought that up, right? Because in my CCRB cases, the CCRB would tell me I was wrong, and I would say, well, maybe the outcome in your perception is wrong, but it's not wrong. What you saw, that's why I say you cannot tell a police officer what they saw, what they heard, or what they felt was wrong. What you saw was a group of unknown men running towards a woman who's by herself, right? You heard the sound of an engine, and what you felt was a potential victim, that someone could be a potential victim. So are you wrong? Absolutely not. Those observations that you made, that's fantastic police work. It turns out that it was something else. It turns out, in fact, they weren't committing a crime, right? They were just lost. And that happens all the time. And that's why I would say that's
they were about to rob. 100%.
You know what I'm saying? What they're lying to you. But,
yeah.
But my point is, you stopped it, right? But here's my point. Maybe I didn't say it right. What if you were wrong? What if it turns out they were just lost and they were just being stupid? That's what the whole point of that stop report is, that, hey, this stop report protects the police officer under qualified immunity. That's your defense as a police officer. You're detaining someone under the Fourth Amendment because of the parameters that you observed. So that protects you. And that's also, that's the receipt if someone wants to make a complaint. But that is your protection. I had to right to stop this person because they're the observations that I made. And sometimes, and that's my hope when people say, well, you were wrong. Because if they did have an illegal firearm on them, are you right now? That's the part that I would find a problem when it came to city council, when it came to CCRB, that it would be a less of a scrutiny or critique if the person ended up having a legal firearm. So my point is, I think that's wrong, because what if you conduct a bad stop and it turns out it yields on a legal firearm? Is that better than if you conducted a stop properly and it ends up yielding nothing? And I think that it's like playing blackjack. The best blackjack players always do the same thing. Even if they're going to lose several hands, they'll continue to do the same pattern because that's the proper way. And that's my argument. You should conduct proper stops, even if it leads to nothing. It doesn't yield something positive, rather than conducting a bad stop. Right? Let's say, for instance, there's a subject there, and I say, you know what? I just know they have an illegal firearm because it's a gang member. I just know they have I just know it. But I don't have any indications, observations to make that stop, and I make that stop and get the firearm. Is that a good stop? No. But if I see something, they have all the behavioral indicators of a firearm, and I engage that person, and it doesn't lead to a firearm, is that a bad stop? No, you don't have a crystal ball. And that's the whole point of the stop question first. And I think the federal monitor really distorted it. By the way, I just want to read this. This is kind of off topic, but I think it's hysterical, from Patrick Donahue. He said, Macari ascertained. Eric, I see your ascertain and raise you with my articulation. It's like watching an Ivy League tennis match, you know. But I that's hilarious, by the way. But I just want to say that it is, I think it's like one of the most difficult things is to actually gauge someone in the counter and then actually put it on paper. Because right now you're explaining it, right? You can't have a stop report and then explain it with your hands and then show these behaviors that you made, even on a body camera, right? Sometimes in a CCRB, they would look at it and say, well, I don't see that. Yeah, you don't see it, but I see it, right? Because I have the trained eye, because the movements are so subtle. And I'm so glad that you told me that. That's fantastic police work, because we would do that all the time in anti-crime. How do we find numerous perpetrators when it came to a robbery pattern? We would follow potential victims. And plenty of times, if we didn't have and I thought it was good community policing. So we used to have, in the confines of the South Bronx, we had the train that went to Connecticut. And there was plenty of women that would go 2, 3 in the morning, hop on these trains by themselves. It's right next to the housing developments, and go into work. We would sometimes watch them and follow them to make sure they're safe. Or sometimes we would approach them, say, hey, are you okay? Just want to make sure you're okay. It's 3 in the morning. You're by yourself. So yeah, that's good police work. That's what you should be doing. Absolutely. And in many cases, following the victim leads to the perpetrators.
Exactly. And like, so that stop, actually, we were 100% correct. And I totally get what you're saying. 100%. And that's a great point. But so for that stop, let's just take that stop, and we were correct, right? Like, so we were correct. Kids break down. I'm like, I know what you're doing here. You know, kid starts crying. They're like, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I take their names down and I 250 them. And I bring that to the detective squad, and I go over the 61s I knew that we took with them fitting the description, right? And I'm like, hey, you got to look at these kids. You got to interview these kids. You got to do, you know, we didn't have them in photo array. So like we couldn't do photo match with them or anything. But I'm like, you got to speak to these kids. You know, there was nothing off the top of my head at the moment that I thought connected them to anything else. But I'm like, these are definitely people of interest. They're people. There's definitely something going on in the neighborhood they're from where they're telling people to come down to 8th Avenue to rob Chinese women. Like, you're not just picking that out of the blue, like coming down from Harlem. But let's say that was, you're 100% right. Let's say they just got a call from their mother. I was watching them. It looked like they were casing people, but they just got a call from their mom that said, hey, come home for dinner. And they start running. And it just looks like, and things like that happen too, right? Like the cop, you think you're watching someone casing something, and it's actually totally innocent. Just a couple of kids hanging out, even though they didn't fit the baseline of the neighborhood, even though they're hanging out in a weird spot. And so, like, what's wrong with stop, question, and frisk? And then when when they pull the demographic constantly, it just annoys me, because it's like, well, then put the crime rates next to it and put the demographics of who's committing the crime next to the stops. Put the demographics of the neighborhood where those stops are being performed. Like, if you're going to make the case that the NYPD is racist, then make the case that the NYPD is racist. Don't just use this inflammatory point, which Eric Adams did for 30 years to become the mayor, and now he can't hold up to that point, because then by his standards, the NYPD is a racist organization under Eric Adams. And that's why I say it's so complicated, because when I look at that original clip of Men's Warehouse Adams, 3 suits for $99 Adams, you know, everything he says is correct, in my opinion. And that point, when he says, you know, that I don't have a problem with stop, question, and frisk, I have a problem with the bad stops and stop, question, and frisk. And I think, and it can't be done on a quota. But yet we're seeing that today, and we're seeing that when it comes to, not to get off topic of 250, but we're seeing it how they're dealing with the homeless on the trains, when he just has numbers for numbers. We're just going down on the trains. We're locking all the homeless up, offering 0 services, 0 warning. All of the cases are getting DP'd. We're spending millions every day doing this, and we're having literally 0 effect on homeless in transit, on mentally ill in transit, on them on our streets. It's basically just putting numbers for numbers and dots on the map. And Eric Adams is doing everything that State Senator Eric Adams, Borough President Eric Adams, and Captain and Lieutenant and Sergeant and Police Officer Eric Adams railed against. And to me, I sit there and I watch this guy, and I'm like, wow, he literally made a name off of himself doing railing against exactly what he's doing now. And I honestly got to applaud him, because he's got everybody gaslit. It's like, I was like, wow, I didn't even know you could do that. I didn't even know you could do that.
So I want to go into something, but before I do, I'm just going to say I'm going to mention author that you hate. But before I go into that, I just want to say that when it came to the federal monitor in this minutia of examining stops done by cops, especially with the body camera, I think they're absolutely wrong. And so I'm going to say this. I don't know if people agree with me or not, but I'm wondering if you agree with me. I think it's actually more difficult to look at a stop report and to look at a body camera and say that was a bad stop than say it's a good stop. And I think that's what's wrong. So, I mean, there's a real fine line between good and bad, because how can you tell a police officer, you're watching a body camera, how can you tell the police officer what they saw, what they heard, and what they felt that led to an encounter where they suspect? Because all a stop is that you reasonably suspect that someone was about to commit a crime. Can we just get back to the very simplistic? That's all it is. You reasonably suspect someone committed a crime. I would think it's a reasonable person. I don't think you need any police training to think it's reasonable or unreasonable for your scenario, John, that you're driving and you see someone run into the bushes. Would anybody here, do you need to be a police officer? Do you need to go through extensive training to think that that's odd? And I think that's where we need to bring things back. And sometimes remember when you're average Joe and before you're a police officer or before anyone's in this world of examining police officers, who would think that that's not normal? I would hope, John, that if you were not a cop or anyone here watching right now, that you were in your neighborhood and you saw somebody run into the bushes and drop what you thought was stolen, that any of us would say, whoa, stop the car. Wait a minute. What's going on here? This is your neighborhood. I don't think you need any police experience or any police training to think that's reasonable or unreasonable. That's why I say it's actually more difficult to say a stop is bad than to say it's good, because most of the stops are good, unless you're just driving and you just point and say, stop that guy, and you didn't look at anything. And I don't know any cops that do that personally, not at all. So I think both stops are actually good. So what I'm referring to when I say the author is Malcolm Gladwell. I know you hate that author, but in the book,
I don't hate him. I just like some of his books. I just like I've read.
He's a little kooky, but
I think a lot of times he doesn't make the point of his book. That's all. Like, you know.
True. But in the book that he wrote, Blink, I think that's a great book that transitions to police work. When he talks about, for instance, in the beginning of the book, there's a painting, and no one can figure out if that painting is real or not, right? And somebody looks at it for a second and then determines it's a fake. How did that person know? In that 1 second, they saw 1,000 things because they've seen it before. That's what a police officer does, right? And what they realized, and it talks about in that book, Blink, even if a guy is, let's say, a baseball game, and guy's at the plate, the athlete's at the plate, and he's in his stands, and he's about to swing, and before he actually makes contact, people that are experienced will say, that's a home run, or that's going to be a third base, or that's going to be a foul ball. And how do you know? Because you've seen it 1,000 times. And what they realized is they asked that person to say, how do you know? What did you see? And they say all the things that they saw. In reality is a lot of those things that they thought they saw were not even there because they saw it so many times. And that's, I think, what happens with a police officer also. They see someone walk down the street. They see all the behavioral indicators of potentially having a firearm. They articulate 1,000 things. And then when someone watches that body camera, like, well, I didn't see some of that stuff that you said. Because this is all conglomerate, because they've seen it before, it gets distorted in the mind, in the trained mind. So I think that's another problem. And I think that, honestly, most of the stops are pretty damn good.
So I think it's easy. I disagree with you. I think it's easy to say that anything's bad. Any stop, any arrest, any use of force. I think it's very easy for an untrained eye and someone, I think it's very easy for someone to say something's bad. And, I've given the scenario before, especially with the body cameras. Just take that same scenario, 2:00 in the morning, I'm driving down the block. That body cam never picks up that kid jumping into the bush. It just picks up me now going over to the bush. So, and I think that whole beginning part could be easily scrutinized. I do agree, I agree with that like your knowledge of that area is like, no one's going to be on your level to understand that. If you're doing your job, no one's going to know the minutia of the stuff in your head about that specific area. I mean, just think about how I knew that blocks away there was a commercial vehicle with the same name as the laptop bag. You know what I mean? That's how much I knew about that neighborhood. I knew where cars were parked, commercial vehicles were parked. I mean, so like the DAs or anyone looking at that body camera is never going to be in my mind frame. They're never going to understand it. I could try to talk to them blue in the face, and I used to say like a lot, to DAs or to the bureau chiefs, like, I have a better chance of going to Dunkin' Donuts and explaining this case to them than to you, because you're just not listening to me. You don't want this stop to be good, so you're saying it's not good. You don't want to take this case, so you're trying to find anything to not take it. I'm like, because you're not listening to what I'm telling you. I'm spelling out probable cause for you. You don't want to hear it, you know? And so I think it's easy to do that. But like, I totally agree. And that's a great point when we talk about stop, question, and frisk. But we're also talking about cops that are trying to do their job, that want to do the right thing, that want to fight crime. And I think that is the majority of people. I do. And for some reason, whatever that reason is, city council and a lot of politicians in New York feel like that is not the majority of the NYPD. That is not the majority of police officers. And I don't know why that is. I know there are bad things that come out every day about the New York City Police Department. There's bad things that come out about cops across the country. But I mean, even those things, when you look at them, they're not really, you know, they're just a human error like you find in every other organization and every other large organization and profession across America. So I don't know why the majority of police officers are constantly demonized for, you know, the actions of a few. So yeah, I mean, that's a great topic, dude. And there's another thing I want to discuss, not today, but predictive policing. And I think that weighs in. It's like using AI to predict where crime's going to happen, not who's necessarily going to commit the crime, but where it's going to be happening. Like our gang database, how we use it to predict retaliatory gang shootings, and using data based on that. So I want to get somebody on here about to speak on that this predictive policing. But the human brain, what you explained, the police officer who's been policing in that area, they are doing that predictive policing model, and that's how they're stopping crime, solving crime. They're getting into the minutia, into the weeds, and using their knowledge and the law to stop and solve crime.
Let me just say that we actually agree. So when I say that it's actually harder to say stop is bad, yes, it's easier for the layman's person that doesn't know, but the reality is they're doing the wrong thing, because the reality is it is more difficult to say something is bad than it's good when it comes to stops. They just don't know it, because you can't tell the cop what they saw, what they felt, or what they heard. And that's the problem with the body cameras, right? Because they think because they didn't see it there, and obviously you can't feel it because you're watching it and you can't hear it. Maybe it's not on the audio yet. Doesn't make it a bad stop, because it's what's in the police officer's head, a reasonable person. Now, I just wanted to give a scenario, right? Talk about policing, right? The eye of a police officer, the ability of how important a police officer is such a fantastic tool. So we had a housing development in the South Bronx. It was called Patanzas. Patanzas in the confines of 40 precinct. And we had they want to remove the gang database, but we had a gang there comprised of, anywhere from 16 to 20 years old, of some most violent perpetrators in the South Bronx. And they were involved in a rival gang, in a beef that was going on with kids in the Patterson houses, right? Another gang over there. So we had credible information on one particular night that there was going to be a shooting. And we already had a shooting that resulted in an innocent woman that was walking with her 2 kids who got shot. So on this particular night, we found and we utilized the most low-level violations to get these kids off the street. They knew it was being heavily policed, so they weren't carrying the firearms. The firearms were stashed in trash cans and things like that. We were looking for them, but we couldn't find it. So we removed the kids off the streets for a couple hours to cool things off by finding low-level violations. So we brought them to the precinct, gave them summonses. Just to show you the eye of a police officer. So two of their gang members that were not picked up came to the precinct to meet their buddies, right? So that when their buddies would get out, they could meet up with them. So 2 came, and I'll never forget, the parking lot in Police Service Area 7 is in the back of the precinct. So myself, a lieutenant, and a sergeant, we got into the car. We were actually going to go drive around to continue working this case. And when we got to the front of the precinct, we saw these 2 adversaries, these 2 persons of interest, walk into the precinct to pick up their friends. And I knew right away. I saw the way, this is right in front of the precinct, the way they were walking. I'll never forget the way the kid darted his eyes. We didn't stop immediately. We started to just look at him. And then he patted his chest in such a weird way. So we started to approach them, and I didn't want them to take off and run. We're in the car. These two persons of interest split off. And we end up stopping one directly across the street from the precinct. It turned out he had a loaded 45 caliber firearm, and it was wrapped around his chest. He had a trouser belt around his chest. And how stupid! He had the trouser belt going through the trigger guard, so he had a gun literally sitting right on his chest, and he was wearing sweatpants. So any cops out there that think you don't get firearms on people that have sweatpants, think again. Loaded firearm right across the chest. That, to me, listen, we were able to explain it. We were able to put pen to paper, and actually this kid got processed. But that's a tough one. I think that's a real tough one to explain. Like I said, and someone here put dude by a holster. That was a thing that really helped get illegal firearms off the street is, for some reason, I never had a perpetrator that actually had the holster to those guns. Never, not once. So he utilized a trouser belt to hold that firearm. But again, John, don't you think that's tough to put pen to paper? We were able to do it, but it's a really tough one, to explain how just these behavioral indicators that you've seen time and time again that led to an illegal firearm.
No, yeah, the way you explained it, I mean, and that's the thing. It's always up for interpretation. And that's why I'm saying I think that it's easy to say that that's a bad stop. I think it's easy if you had imagine the body camera, dude. I didn't see what you saw. I just saw you approach the dude and search him and take a gun out of him. It's like, how'd you know it was there? And so like, and I also think the way you articulate things matter as well, and like some guys just aren't good at it. I've seen that. I've seen guys that are really good cops and they just can't explain it. They can't explain it to someone else. They could tell a cop it. They could tell the cop the story. They could tell the sergeant the story, but they don't do a good job of painting the picture for someone who's not a police officer to understand what happened. And that's why communication skills are almost they're crucial in policing, because it's important, dude. Like, and then my other thing is like just that story you told, like, was there a bulge in his chest? Did you see the bulge in his chest? Did it appear to be a firearm? Like, these things may have been there. They may or may not have been there, but they may have been there. And that would have built more reasonable suspicion to frisk and stop, right? And then I felt, when I touched his chest, I felt something hard there that didn't fit, the body. I could feel the firearm. It felt like a firearm to me. I felt firearms on their clothing. I wear a firearm every day on my hip under my clothing. You know what I mean? I know what firearms feel like, as opposed to say that, as opposed to, I saw him pat his chest and I pulled the gun out.
Yeah. Well, to me, like,
it was stories, right? It's two different things,
It's conglomerate things. Like, I knew there's no way these two kids are traveling on foot from where they were headed to get to the precinct without having a firearm in. There's no way. They had to pass through enemy territory. And the way that they were darting their eyes and the way that they were observing us, especially, and that's why you have to look at past experiences. Normally, in the past, when I have persons of interest that are arrested or subjects inside the precinct, when their buddies come to meet them, they usually come in there laughing, or usually they want to have stupid interactions with the police because now they're picking up their buddies and the buddies are leaving the precinct. So that's an opportunity. And so they're darting their eyes the way they're looking. They knew to get to this location, they had to be armed. Obviously, on the chest, did I see the firearm? No, but I saw behavioral indicators that were odd. The way the kid was patting his chest, certain movements were just odd that you wouldn't do on a normal basis. It didn't fit the baseline. It was a conglomerate of issues. The way they were walking, the way they darted their eyes, the way he moved his hand, everything was indicative. And then the way they split off, where they're walking, the time of day. So it's all these conglomerate of issues put together. And that case ended up going through. But that's very tough to articulate to me, very tough to explain, especially to someone that doesn't do police work. Like, how do I say that? Hey, and this is the reality. This kid cannot walk from 143rd Street and 3rd Avenue to the NYPD PSA 7 without carrying a gun. It's just impossible.
Yeah, explain that to Tiffany Caban, City Council.
Exactly.
When she was the DA. When she was an assistant DA, explain it. What do you mean he can't walk? He doesn't have legs? What do you mean? And that's, that's just the whole thing where like, I don't know. I did like it's really nuanced, dude. And just to go back on the 250s, like the training's severely lacking. And why is the training severely lacking? Because you do nothing to recruit and retain experienced officers. You've demonized all of the guys in our era that should be training your youth. And we're no longer in the police department. We're on podcasts, or we're in the police department scared, shivering our boots to say a word because we don't fit the baseline of what it makes a good cop today, or what makes a good supervisor or a good executive, right? And so it's sad, man. It's sad. I just to watch how early all of us were removed from the police department and gone and forced into green pastures to get out. It's sad to watch because there's just so much knowledge and experience that are lost. And I don't know how you could come up with a good training program when you don't have people that actually know how to do it and know how to articulate and know how to say these things. So thank goodness for the finest Unfiltered.
So, but ultimately, do you? So, I guess we could agree, though, right? Because it's almost like we're defending Eric Adams at this point, right? The stops went up because crime went up. He's not going. So, the question is, would he admit that crime is up because the stops are up? What do you think is going to be his game plan to defend this? Right? He has to defend this because what his stance has been for his political career, and especially even his time as a cop, is that these stops are unlawful. They're not engaged properly, and they're targeting black and brown. The stops are up in his under his administration, and not only that, he's actually stopped more black and brown than before. So how is he going to counteract that, and how is he going to defend it, if he is?
Well, he's basically just going to say that he has the guys out there doing police work, right? Like you heard Shell defending him, saying, Mayor lets us play the West Coast offense and go out on offense, right? And play out there, right? Like you remember all those takes on it. So he's just going to do like he's going to play that he's a cop. But it can't be understated that like I actually think I agree with you. I think we're defending Eric Adams and the NYPD when it comes to stop, question, and frisk and the practice of it. 100%. And we're agreeing with State Senator Eric Adams. But the thing that we're saying is that, and I think the overall case, when we look at it, this is such a small part of the public safety platform because you only have so few guys doing it. This is not the majority of the police department. I mean, the city article, you would think, oh my God, it doubled. 25,000 stops compared to when you had nearly 1 million stops going on in 2011, right? So, I mean, did he really bring back proactive police work? Did he really bring back stop, question, and frisk? No, but he definitely brought back quotas. And he definitely, I mean, not that he brought it back, he's been doing it the entire time. And he definitely contradicted himself from his previous stances. And, I think, again, I think when you look at Eric Adams as a whole, he's a really complicated figure because he plays this public safety Rudy Giuliani type role when he's the furthest thing from it. And at the same time, he demonized the guy for 30 years. And the only portions that he took from the Giuliani era were actually the portions that were bad, were the portions that were heavily critiqued. So it's just the guy. It's amazing to watch, dude. It's amazing to watch. And again, we're touting crimes down. It's at historic lows, and I just can't say this enough. Since 2019, violent crime is up 28% in New York City. So I mean, so I don't know what we're talking about. History, the lowest recording shootings in recorded history. I mean, if any of you guys believe that stat, let me know. I got some ice to sell you in the winter. I got some sand to sell you in the summer. Because I mean, you're lost. And all of the newspapers that are parroting this, shame on you all. Shame on you all, because we're talking about recorded shootings. At the same time, we're watching, we talk about transit crime being down. At the same time, we're talking about COs in transit fudging the numbers and not taking reports and pushing cops to not take reports and downgrading crimes. And you're actually reporting downgraded crimes while spelling out felonies. I mean, shame on you.
One of my CCRB cases that went to trial, and here's where I talk about that there's too much critique and too much emphasis on discipline. So what do you think about this process, right? So I actually had a stop and I had an encounter. And think about this. The only thing I did wrong that day, I say to myself, is actually go to work and take self-initiated police action. Because I was on my way to the precinct, coming from court. I could have easily just went to the back of the command, parked the car, and went home. I was literally almost there, and I saw a person of interest, and every indicator was that this person had a firearm. I actually got a firearm the day before, the one I was telling you about with the trouser belt, right by the precinct. And I had someone that had very similar behavioral indicators. Every reason to believe he had a firearm. Conducted the stop. Turned out to be he didn't have a firearm. Just a complete police agitator. So they went to administrative trial, and that case, this actual person of interest, who's now a complainant at the administrative trial, was trying to say that this stop was based on race, and the judge at the time, which was Paul Gamble, actually agreed it wasn't based on race at all. He actually believed that the stop was in good faith. But the argument was, this was the premise of whether it was I at level 2 in the intrusive police work, or was it level 3? Now, that I think we could totally cross hairs. And that was my point, is that they didn't see the things that I saw. And they didn't see the things that the other members of my team saw that led to this stop also. But even if that was the case, and I'll defend it and say it was a fantastic stop. But even if that was the case, let's say he was right. Let's rhetorically say he was right. It's level 2 and not level 3. Don't you think that should be a discussion, a form of training, and not necessarily discipline? It's not on bad faith. It's not, the stop is not conducted with emotion. It's a stop conducted with good faith police work. And that's where I think is a problem. Why is the emphasis on discipline, whether, this is level 2, level 3? I think that's where we start crossing and splitting hairs. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, these stops, dude, they're so nuanced. There's so many factors in there, right? And like I said, you could say that they're good or bad very easily, right? You could sway it in either direction. So when there's a good faith error made, should there be discipline? I don't think so at all. Like, it's a good faith error. I mean, like, it's all right. At the end of the day, you stopped him. Okay. And then what happened? He's harmed for the rest of his life. He has trauma because he was stopped. I mean, I for everyone on here, yes, I'll go to bat that I've been stopped more than everybody on. I'll go to my grave with that one, because I got stopped 2 times a day when I was a kid, and I grew up in Italian neighborhoods, which you would consider white neighborhoods. And I said it. I couldn't stand the police department when I was a kid. I'd be playing basketball and the sun would creak down, and next thing I know, I was getting thrown up against the fence, getting searched, getting thrown on the floor, And what was I doing? I was playing basketball. I'm like, and I would mouth off and all this stuff, and I didn't understand any of it, and I thought it was a little bit much, the whole TNT nonsense. I thought it was. I was like, this is ridiculous. It's really like this heavy-handed approach to policing, but also at the same time, I noticed when I stopped hanging out in the park and I stopped hanging around idiots, I really never got stopped again. So, there's a lot of different things to that too. Were there a lot of bad stops performed on me? In my opinion, they were bad, but I don't know the whole circumstances, right? I wasn't really there. I remember one night I went out with 2 of my friends, and we went to Forest Avenue. We went to like an Irish bar, like a Pat Donahue style bar, right? And I was like, not my scene, bro. I want to hear freestyle. I want to see girls dancing. So I'm like, let's get the hell out of here. Like, what are we doing here? There's all dudes in here. So we leave. We're about to go somewhere else. I think we were going to Bay Ridge or whatever. I'm like, let's get the hell out of here. Not my scene, you know? And so we get back to the car. It's in the 120. It's in the confines of the 120 precinct. I'm probably like 18, 19. And yeah, in New York City, you used to be able to go out 16, 17, 18, 19, even though everything was 21, you know? but so I'm like, let's go to Bay Ridge. Let's get the hell out of here. So we get back in the car. And next thing I know, it's a true story. Cops roll up from both directions on us. Boop, 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 boop. Unmarked cars. Sergeant gets out. He's got a shotgun. I'm like, yo, we all got our hands like this. I got my hands up on the thing like this. I have no idea what happened. Sergeant comes out. He comes in the car. He puts the shotgun to my friend who's right behind me. He looks in the car and he goes, I just wanted to see how fast your heart was beating. And they go back and they get in the car and they bounce. Right? And like, I wasn't a cop at the time. I couldn't stand the cops. I mean, you know, I think about that with my kids, I'm like, oh my God, that is horrible. But then when I think about it from the police standpoint, there was definitely some type of robbery or violent crime that just occurred. And they thought we were the perpetrators. And immediately upon coming in the car, they realized it wasn't us. It was just three Guidos looking to go out. And the guy cracked a joke and they left. Now, I don't know that he was supposed to have the shotgun or wasn't supposed to have the shotgun.
You had hair then? You had hair?
I had hair. Yeah, I had hair.
See, Cavaricci's what he wears.
Yeah. So I had hair then, you know, and I don't know, but like, you know, I mean, I get, as a traumatizing situation. That's a crazy situation. You had a gun pointed at you, you know? Yeah, we had guns pointed at us, but we also didn't know what the hell just occurred. And I'm going to say right now, something bad happened. You know, I'm going to say something bad happened. There was no 250 done. There was nothing done. But at the other end of it, if your kid was just shot or stabbed, you would want the police out there trying to find out who did that, right?
I think it's important to mention this case, but my case. So Judge Paul Campbell presided on it. I thought it was a fantastic stop. All the behavioral indicators were there. We had every reason to believe that this subject had a firearm. Everything was there. It was just like, I always say all the time, when you see someone that has a legal firearm, you're about to encounter, it's almost like those blurry pictures, and you focus in, and then the image just emerges. That was this stop. It turned out he didn't have a legal firearm. He didn't have a firearm at all. But does that mean we're wrong? And that's why I say they're putting too much emphasis on the outcome. Because if he did have a firearm, does it change anything? To me, it doesn't change anything on that stop. So at the administrative trial, they found that, you know, it was all in good faith. They found that it was not based on race. We did our job, but the defining factor for Paul Campbell was that he felt that the stop was based more on level 2 and level 3. I to this day say it was absolutely level 3, and that's where I think that it's up to interpretation. How could you say what we felt, saw, or what we heard? But I lost 18 vacation days because of the disciplinary matrix. And then then he sued, and I had to pay $3,000 out of my own pocket. So that's where I think the problem is, and that's where I think this is a big issue that really curbs the police officers from doing their job and then putting an emphasis. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, especially Jessica Tisch is saying to put discipline on police officers when it comes to body cameras. I think that is absolutely open to interpretation. And again, I still think they made the wrong decision. But ultimately, I had to pay out of my own pocket because he sued, and I was found guilty by the CCRB. And when you're substantiated found guilty by the CCRB, the job will not indemnify you. The only ones they'll indemnify is Eric Adams for a sexual allegation 30 years prior, but not a police officer doing his job. Yeah, Mike Smith says it, 22 days and 2 CDs for the Matrix. Yeah. And what's interesting about that also, the encounter I had was before the inception of the Matrix, 2019. The Matrix met its inception January 2021, and I was actually held to the Matrix, and I received the aggravating factors.
That honestly, that is, you want to know why cops are leaving? Replay what Eric Dim just said. Replay what he just said. He made a good stop, a good faith-based stop. He was accused of being a racist for nothing other than that he did anything wrong other than the color of his skin. and then he loses vacation days. He gets demonized. He goes through these investigations like he's a criminal. He gets demonized, and then ultimately has to pay out of his own pocket. Why are cops leaving today? Oh, bail reform. They want more pay. Like, nah, dude, no, stop. I don't want to hear it. Cops aren't leaving over bail reform. There's not a cop on the job that's left for bail. And if they told you that, they don't even know what bail. They couldn't even spell bail reform. They couldn't even tell you what a statute in bail.
That's
reform.
hilarious.
So if anybody said that, that's not what it is. Nobody gives a shit. The DAs were never drawn up. This is exactly why. Yeah, and you're 100% right. That is what Jessica Tisch said. She said she's going to put more parameters on stop, question, and frisk, and she's going to make the penalties harsher. Not for Kaz. If Kaz makes a bad stop, we don't know. He's like, even though if you go on NYPD personnel online and you look up Kaz Daughtry, he shows up as a first grade detective because corruption runs rampant in the Adams administration. So he's getting the highest base salary you could ever get, eligible for overtime. For some reason, he's not eligible he doesn't fall under the parameters of CCRB, so he can do whatever he wants, even though he technically is a uniform member of service. So, but that would never happen for him because he's a deputy mayor, Eric. You're not a deputy mayor. Listen, so that's what it is, But yeah, that is disturbing to me. That is absolutely disturbing to me. You got to pay out of your own pocket.
Yeah.
You had to be scrutinized. Oh, I got the scrutiny. You're a cop. You're going to be scrutinized, but you get demonized. You got to pay out of your own pocket. Plus, I mean, if you do the math, like how much do you think that is? All the days plus the money you had to shell out. How much money did you get taken away from you? If you had to estimate, just estimation.
Oh, I say it's probably about $20,000. There's no doubt about it.
And for what? Why did you have to pay $20,000?
And that's why I say, and you're absolutely right, for doing my job. The only thing I did wrong that day, and I say it now,
was doing your job.
I should have just went home. I went to court, testified the grand jury for getting someone with a legal firearm strapped around their chest through a .45 caliber, through the trigger guard. If anything, I think we saved that kid's life too. I'm like, do you realize you have this trouser belt through the trigger guard? And then on our way back to the precinct, I could have easily just went to the parking lot because this was about 100 feet from the precinct parking lot, and I could have just went to the parking lot, went inside the precinct, and went home. But instead, and that's why I say, listen, I'm open to criticism. I still stand by that stop today. I think all the factors, all the contributing factors that led to a reasonable stop, and that's why I say I don't think you need to be a police officer with such experience to actually say that this is reasonable or not. For instance, I think the case that you gave is a great textbook for anyone to say, hey, that's reasonable. And that's all it is. It's even probable cause, just reason to believe someone did commit this crime. It's something reasonable. Just common sense makes sense. A normal person, that's why we go through a psych. A normal person would say, hey, this makes sense. And that's why I said, even to the judge, if they believe it was level 2 or level 3, well, now we're really, getting to minutia. I think that could be something more instructional. That's more beneficial so the cops engage in self-initiated police work. But for me to lose 18 vacation days because of aggravating factors in that disciplinary matrix and to have to pay out of pocket, that hurts every police officer moving forward. Now I was a lieutenant. If the lieutenant is going to lose $20,000, what's going to happen to the cop?
Yeah. No, it's crazy, man. So listen, before we get out of here, we're going on about 2 hours. Ron Layson just sent something. I want to bring that up real quick. It looks like we just had a police-involved shooting in Astoria, Queens. He is the scene right now. So real quick, I'll go over it. This comes out 9:41, New York Post. Joe Marino. Knife-wielding man was shot dead by police in Queens after he lunged at officers while clutching a 14-inch blade, according to sources. Cops were called to an address in Astoria just before 6:30 a.m. Monday following reports of a man armed with a knife. 6:30 in the morning, 911 call comes over, man armed with a knife. Officers respond. After officers unsuccessfully, shocker. Eric, could you believe that the taser failed? I can't believe it. We should continue to use the taser when someone's lunging at you with a knife because
Where's
it's worked
Jamel Thompson?
so many
Where's Jamel?
times. So many times we should just continue to do that. I can't recall an incident in the near in like that we've covered recently where the tasers actually worked. Like when someone's coming at you with a knife, pull out your gun. After officers unsuccessfully deployed a taser, the suspect reportedly lunged at cops with the weapon, possibly a kitchen knife, according to law enforcement sources. So I'm going to say they're racist. I mean, from everything I'm reading here, the police department's racist, and yeah, this will be the investigation of the year for CCRB so far.
You know what? Where's Jamel Thompson? Because Jamel Thompson, who's a podcaster, actually, tried to put my feet to the fire because I said that the taser is ineffective 49% of the time, and he said he wanted me to cite my sources. Now there is a source there in AM newspaper that actually articulates that, but I think, you know what, John? I think Tramel's right. I think I'm wrong. I don't think it's 49% of the time. It's probably much higher. The taser is probably ineffective at a much more alarming rate. And again, you're a police officer out there right now. You're active with the NYPD or any law enforcement agency in this country. Do not pull out your taser when you're armed with someone with a knife. Pull out your firearm. If anything, I think that this ideology that police officers should pull out their taser is actually leading to more shootings. And actually, I think more perpetrators with knives are getting shot because the taser is failing and that armed adversary is still approaching. And they're unfortunate. The only choice they have is to actually fire a shot. And if actually just displaying or brandishing a firearm, that may be enough to actually stop that perpetrator with a knife.
I just think we should continue to show how ineffective the taser are because it's unbelievable, dude. I'm sorry, this dude's like threatening you with this knife. He's sorry, I don't have that photo up. I gotta be able to get that photo. The knife is like a handmade shank. It looks like has like white tape around it and a long blade. I'm not pulling out my taser. I'm sorry. Weapon was recovered. Investigation ongoing. Shame, man. Terrible. But yeah, let's send social workers. That'll work.
Juju's got a good one here. Oh yeah, this is a real small one. Thanks, Juju. Make it mandatory to be able to disarm those with knives without a firearm. Yeah, that's great. Great leadership. I really that's your leadership from the NYPD.
Unless you're Juju, because then he's gonna shoot you if he just doesn't like you. Because he made fun of me on social media. I'm gonna shoot him.
Yeah, that's the truth. I'm serious. I mean it. I think that taking the taser out in an armed encounter with someone with a knife actually leads to more shootings. Think about it. If you're brandishing a firearm and you engage in enough dialogue, you may be able to get them to drop that and disarm themselves. But if you have the taser and that perpetrator or that adversary sees that they can actually get leverage on you, and if they get close enough, you have no choice but to retract them and pull the trigger. You have no choice.
Yeah, I mean that the deadly force will be met with deadly force, and usually that's it. I mean, if you're going you're taking a taser to a knife fight, I'm not taking that. I'll take the knife.
I mean, can you think of a excuse me? Can you think of a successful story where we had an armed perpetrator with a knife and a cop deployed a taser? I can't think of one right now.
I think the only one I think stands out is, do you remember the kid in the precinct? Guy comes in with a knife long time ago.
Yeah.
And the kid like runs to get the taser. Do you remember
that was that was the only time
one. There was that one, and then I remember like 2 years ago, I saw another one where the guy was actually charging, and we were all like, "Oh my god!" And the taser worked, thank God. But I remember that one too. There was something. It was in like a whole project hallway. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it worked. But both of those scenarios, the department like lauded them, right? Oh yes, this is why the taser's great. Blah blah blah. Not non-lethal, right? Even though it's less than lethal, and really it's actually possibly lethal. It should be called because it could still be
all
lethal. Yeah. I mean, it should be called possibly lethal. The taser. It actually worked, but it is very few, dude. I'm in like very few and far between. The majority of these situations are fluid and the taser fails often. Like I don't even know where they're getting that 50% number from. I don't. That's
Well,
that must be the same place that they're getting that crime down.
Let's call Sam Anton, figure this out. But you know what? It shows that it doesn't work. The numbers are so low when it's effective that you actually remember the incident. Think about it. All the police interactions that happen on a daily basis, that is so significant that you remember. You remember it. That's a landmark.
Mike Smith wants to know what level they were at. They were at common law, right? Sir, is that knife for cooking? Or...
You got to fill out the how many stops act for that.
Yes. So they just crazy times, man, crazy times. So yeah. So Eric Adams, and stop question first. Eric Adams taught me one thing, though, right? If he taught, you could harp about anything and then do the same exact thing and use it, So shout out to Eric Adams, 30 years of demonizing practice that he's put into play. Got himself to the point where he could be the guy doing it.
But it's not racist. When Eric Adams has, 99% black and brown and stuff, it's not racist. Only racist.
They look like him. His administration's chocolate. That's not racist either. Don't worry.
So what do you foresee what do you think? We don't know if he said it yet. What do you think he's going to say why there are 99% black and brown stopped by the police under his administration, his leadership?
Honestly, I can't predict because he's so unpredictable. But whatever he says, I'm sure it will be hysterical, and I'm sure it will go viral on social media.
He's gonna go, "What are you, stupid?"
Yeah. whatever his rationale for this is. Yeah, I don't know, dude. The dude, he is hysterical, man. He's a funny dude. New York Post lording over him that like. Oh yeah, we need Eric Adams. It's so great that he's running as an independent to protect from the far left. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. Did you by chance get to see that Rogan interview with Dave Smith and Douglas Murray? Did you see that at all?
No, I want to see it. I didn't get to see it. You watch it?
I watched it. And basically like the premise of the interview, the premise of the debate was kind of like that podcasters, unless you're an expert or unless you've been somewhere, you shouldn't be able to have an opinion on it, and you shouldn't go out online and talk about it. And I thought it was an interesting conversation. And they were going back and forth about, because Douglas Murray is like, oh, you can't speak about the Palestine-Israeli conflict if you've never been there. Right, you can't speak about it. And the guy Dave Smith, basically, like his argument's like, well, I've never been to Nazi Germany. Am I not allowed to have an opinion on it? And he's like, yeah, but that was in the past. And so they were like going back and forth about that. And I'm just sitting there and I'm watching all these people, like the dude that invented the Babylon Bee. I don't know if he invented it, but whatever, Seth, whatever the hell his name is. And all these people online now that are basically calling for censorship. All of these free speech advocates at one time were free speech advocates are calling for online censorship. And I'm like, I'm so not there. I don't care what you say, who you say it about. You should have the right to say it. I mean, I thought this is America. I thought that's, I'm like, I'm so far removed from that argument that we need to censor people. I'm watching now the right do it, right? And people are like all for it. And I'm like, wait, time out. It wasn't cool when the woke left was doing it, but it's cool because the woke right's doing it. I'm like, nah, I'm sorry. You're not getting me on that we should have censorship on the internet. Like I'm so over it. I'm so over us not being able to talk about things. And the fact that they were talking about this Israeli conflict and they were bringing in Nazis, and the whole time I'm sitting there and I'm going, the Argentinian president just came out and he's releasing all this data that basically Nazis were living in Germany. They fled to Germany, and supposedly, allegedly, Hitler actually lived in Germany for 40 years after, when he was supposed to be dead. So our children are learning, and we learned that Hitler was killed in a bunker in Germany but the Argentinian president is going to come out to like soon and release this data that's supposedly going to debunk all of that. And I'm sitting there and going, maybe the experts don't know what the hell they're talking about. Maybe those experts on World War II aren't that great. And then Marlon brought up something the other day about the pyramids, about how they go like miles into the ground and they have these structures, and that came out. The experts never told us about that. The fringe people did, right? And I'm like, and even if you're wrong, you're not allowed to have an opinion. So it's like, it's a pretty interesting topic. But even that, I'm sitting there and going, well, why aren't you talking about that? Why aren't you talking about how the experts told us that Hitler was dead? and in fact, well, we don't know in fact yet, but allegedly he wasn't.
First of all, it's the stupidest thing. I don't know why they're scared of opinions. Well, I think we have an idea why they're scared of opinions, but it's the stupidest thing to say. I was never a woman. John, you were never a woman, but I can tell you, I think I know what a woman is, right? I mean, I know that's like the age-old question now. What is a woman? I think I know what a woman is. I think you know what a woman is. I was never a woman. You were never a woman. We could say what we believe a woman is. This is the most ridiculous thing. So we can't comment on something that we have an opinion on, and you have to be there. That's the most ridiculous thing. Well, if that's the case, well, then absolutely Kamala Harris should have never received any votes. She was never at the border, and she was supposed to be the one to protect the border. So that just rivals that response also. People are really terrified of opinions at this point. It's both sides. It's getting crazy that we're trying to put any hindership on speech. I mean, our forefathers must be rolling their graves right now. The whole premise of this country was freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of expression. And how we completely deviated from that, scary. This is scary times, brother.
It really is, dude. When you know, like I was online yesterday, and of course Chris Cuomo was weighing in, that loser. Like, you know, like that dude is the biggest loser ever. Like, he just sways on any conversation with the political winds and tries to make himself relevant and paint them like as himself as like this free thinker. Dude is a paid propagandist. His soul is for sale to the highest bidder, and he will say and do anything. I'm so sick of hearing that, dude. But watching all these like free speech advocates that I thought were free speech advocates calling for censorship, we have to be careful. You can't say anything about Israel because you might have people that go against Israel. You can't say anything about Palestine because then you're going to have people that are going to go against Muslims. You can't say anything about criminals because then you're going to incite violence. I was reading this article the other day. It's so funny. I was reading this article about these e-bikes, right? In my neighborhood in Florida, like the biggest problem here is kids on e-bikes, teenagers on e-bikes. Like that's what they're concerned with. And rightfully so. It's dangerous. You don't want to see any kids get hurt, and you don't want to see any elderly get hurt. You don't want to see young children or disabled people get injured by these e-bikes. These kids are flying on these e-bikes. So I get the conversation. I totally do. But this one newspaper, the St. John Citizen, they write an article, like they call it like the baby pagans or whatever, right? The baby pagans, like it was a joke, you know what I mean? And basically, it's like it's just a article, like it's straight down the line on the topic, saying, you know, this is what people are complaining about, this is what people say about that are on the opposing side of that. And that's it. And then I go and I read the comments, and it's like, this article's inciting violence. I'm like, what? Like, this is a conversation that's had all day, every day. You want to bring in laws. You want to make Florida, New York. I'm not for it. They want camera. I hear people bring in camera lights. Bring in. I'm like, no, I'll sell you a house. Sell you my house. Go. I got a house on Staten Island. I'll sell it to you. Like, you want camera lights? There's plenty. I got one on my block. Keep you safe. You know, but like watching people say that because you had an opinion on something, and this paper actually didn't even have an opinion on it. All they did is just report it on it. Like, this is the current issue, but people are saying to pull it down. You're inciting violence. I'm like, what the hell is wrong with everybody?
Yeah. Mickey Murphy puts a great quote here. To learn who is in control over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize Voltaire. Yeah, absolutely. That's spot on. And Mike Smith says too many crazy liberals went down to Florida. You got to watch and make sure that shit stays the same. Yeah, let's protect Florida. Let's protect South Carolina. These good places that people go to. It's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. But it's funny how everything's relative, right? Like in that neighborhood, how important it is, and the emphasis on e-bikes, right? With sidewalks. But yeah, listen, it's just this is a wild time. Really putting an emphasis on free speech, and I did a podcast with a buddy of mine on the dichotomy between free speech and hate speech. And the reality is, hate speech is free speech. There is no, and we have to allow it, even if you don't like it. You have to mute it out. You can't listen to it.
I hate the free speech laws, dude. I'm sorry. I hate the hate speech laws. Or the hate crime laws. They really bother me. I'm like, it's something that like I always talk about, and I go back and forth a lot with people on. We get into a fist fight, me and you right now, and I say a racial slur. That means I'm a racist? That means that crime should be higher, or vice versa? I'm like, no, we got in a fist fight. The crime is the crime. We both assault. We're both guilty of assault. What do you need to tack anything on there for? Oh, he called me a Guido. Oh, he called me a Jew. Like, what do you gotta tack anything on there for? Like, who are we saving from this? Like, I come up and I hit you in the head with a bat because I don't like you, or I do it because I don't like you because you're a certain whatever. You are something that I hate. What's the difference? Shouldn't the crime carry the charge?
I actually agree with you, because what's in someone's head and their freedom of expression is their business. I mean, listen, I'm Jewish. There's plenty of people that don't like Jews, and I've heard it throughout my entire life. What am I going to fight with every single person? I could care less. I'm not going to change their opinion. If they don't like it, that's their life. I don't care. I'm not going to try to change them. I just won't listen to it, and I won't entertain it. We have to have thicker skin. But this idea of what's hate speech and what's free speech, I don't like it, because we start crossing into parameters we don't want to get into. I agree. What's the difference? If you got hit with a bat, does it make a difference on what your injury is? If we attack someone because they're gay, does it make a difference? You still attacked them. Does it matter what's in their head? Are you going to change that person and rehabilitate their thought process? Maybe, maybe not. But does it make a difference? I'm with you. I agree.
Are they less of a danger to society if they just hit you for a different reason? Oh no, like the guy still, there's something seriously wrong with that person. There's still as much of a danger, regardless of the reasoning behind it. If the intent's there to hit you with a bat, the intent's there. That's a crime that should charge. Like, are we proving intent? Yeah, then if we're proving intent, there's an intent there. The injuries, the injuries will sustain other things, but even if just the intent to injure itself is there, crazy, man. So, but yeah, that it's. I recommend watching the interview, but just think of it from those terms. It's like they're literally calling for censorship. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and if you look at online, everyone discussing this, and I'm like, what have the experts been right about? So all of the stuff I talked about in 2021 and 2022 related to the mandates, I am the furthest thing from an expert on anything, but I was 100% right. I was 100% right when it came to the mandates. I'm not an expert. The experts, everything the expert told you was wrong, was 100% wrong. And everything some dumb idiot told you on the internet was right. So, but we should only listen to the experts at that point. But I wasn't an expert because I got infected with it, because I lived through it. That doesn't make me an expert. The expert is the person who's getting paid by the people that want to push a narrative to you. Got it.
Mike Smith is spot on here. And this is the reality, right? If people heard the shit we would say to each other in the squad or in police cars, they would shut it down, and we all loved each other. That's just having thick skin. That's just having thick skin and having fun with one another. You're absolutely spot on, Mike. Absolutely. I actually read something recently that I mean, I don't know how true it is. You know, you read these things that come up on social media, but that people that make fun of each other, those people are actually more honest with each other and have better relationships than people that don't. I agree with that. Absolutely. You're spot on. Now, we're 2 hours and 20 minutes into it. Please like, share, subscribe. I don't want to get totally on topic, but I think we should answer this one question by Tabitha Foster. It's a huge topic right now. Why did the Asian councilwoman that bit a cop get her charges dropped? That's a great question. See, she took a bite out of crime. What do you think about that whole thing? It's I know we spoke about it on Friday a little bit, but now that it's really just totally dropped, what do you think?
So, I think one, I want to say shout out to the executive perspective, Ron Layson and Rob Lukash. We got a couple of clips coming out this week that are going to go out on YouTube and on social media about them breaking that exact thing down and their opinions on it. I think they did a great job on that. So from my viewpoint, I think we learned a lot in recent years is that politics is entertainment. When politicians commit a crime, it's very entertaining to watch their case, to watch the news report about it. But the political class, the elected class, like the elites in America, are exempted from criminal prosecution. They might have a court case. They might be charged. They might have evidence, damning evidence against them, as like taking a chunk out of a chief's arm in your mouth and chewing on it like it's a chicken bone. There might be video evidence of it, like there is in this case. There might be numerous eyewitness accounts of it, as this case. But we're not going to hold that person accountable. Because, you know why? Because they conned a whole bunch of people into voting for them. So Susan Zwang, for those of you that don't know, is a member. She's a Democrat. She's a Democrat. She's a councilwoman out in Bay Ridge and a couple other areas of southern Brooklyn that are densely populated with Asians, right? So she gets elected Democrat, but she's a member and continues to be a member of the Common Sense Caucus, which is comprised mainly of Republicans and moderate Democrat Bob Holden. I mean, to me, when I watched that, I was like, oh, yeah, here we go again, where we have all this news around the council person or a mayor or any other elected official, and absolutely nothing is done to them. I think the message that was sent was that you could take a chunk out of a police officer's arm, and instead of going on criminal justice, we need to have restorative justice. And whatever the chief's name is, I can't think of his name. Italian guy, skinny Italian guy, I can't think of his name, but whatever his name
Frank
is.
something, right? Frank something.
Frank DiGiacomo.
Giacomo.
DiGiacomo. He was totally okay with it. He didn't see any issue with it. He got a chunk taken out of his arm, and maybe Frank was okay with it for himself. But is he okay with it for the bigger picture? Is it okay to take a bite out of cops? Is that okay? Is that how we take a bite out of crime? Restorative justice? Is this what you expect to happen? I mean, me personally, I'm sitting there and saying she should be held just as accountable as the black kid in Brownsville that takes a chunk out of a cop's arm. Right? Because if she's not, guess what? That response is disproportionate. And I'll tell you damn what, that is definitely discriminatory.
Well, I think it's ironic, right? Isn't it ironic that the city council, along with New York State, supported bail reform because they fought against the elites and people of status and people with money having a different experience, a different justice system in the courtroom for people that have status compared to people that are poor that don't have the same means. And yet, she's now the same person that utilized her status in the courtroom to get herself out of trouble. So I find it just complete irony. I think it's absolutely insane. But what does it send a message in America? Become rich or become a politician, and you can walk on water, and you can do whatever you want in this lifetime. You can get away with anything. And to Giacomo out there, You know what, John? It solidifies everything you've been saying since day one about the vaccine mandate when it comes to the NYPD. These guys will do whatever it takes to be part of the team. I hope that Giacomo, you get yourself another star, or maybe you get yourself a job as the first deputy commissioner for actually taking one for the team, because that's exactly what you did. I find it hard to believe that you allow someone to take a bite out of your arm and take some skin off of you and think this is better, this is for the good. I'm sure there was some conversation. I hope you get another star quick, because the message that you sent throughout to the entire world is that you can assault a New York City police officer and get away with it. If she can bite a chief, what could she do to a cop? It would be okay because she stabbed him in the heart. I mean, there's no accountability here. But again, I do find the irony there that the people that fought against status and economic prestigious statute in the courtroom have now implemented and utilized their status as well. It's quite impressive.
Well, it is rumored. I think it's fair to say, and Frank, maybe you could weigh in on this. You could hit us up because you can hit us up. We're actually going to get a phone number up here soon, so you guys could call in. But Frank, maybe you could weigh in. You could let us know. Send us an email. Text me, whatever you want. Maybe you could let us know, because it's being alleged that there were actually complaints against you from some Asian women that miraculously got dropped at the same time her case got dropped. I don't know that that's true. It could just be a rumor. But there were some allegations around that, so that there could be some self-serving interest in there as well. Who knows? New York's a crazy place. What is it? 8 million people, 50 million opinions. But a lot of them are. Who is this? How's your activity? Says you signed up for this. Signed up. That's it, right? You signed up to get a chunk taken out of your arm. I mean, I think it was Lukash. Yeah, it was Rob No Cash. Excuse me, Rob No Cash.
No Cash, Chief. What's up?
It was Chief No Cash. Guy was stingy with the overtime. I think he was saying, what the hell did he say? He said, he was like, often at these protests, you will see council members get arrested, right? You saw Bill de Blasio get arrested, right? You see Jumaane Williams get arrested, right? They never really got arrested. They got arrested. They got processed. They got issued a desk appearance ticket. But this went to a whole new level, man. It's all right to stand with your constituents. It's all right to get arrested for, what do they call that? Like non-combative protest, like you're just not like passive resistance. Yeah, like you're passively resisting or whatever. Like it's fine. It's a totally different thing when you're taking a bite out of somebody's arm. Totally different. Totally different.
It makes sense if there's some backdoor deal, because if he's got some allegations and everything went away, it makes sense. But hey, listen, with this administration, I'm not surprised. There's a bunch of deviants in this administration. Mike Smith says it. Mike, you're on fire today. Great comments. He said she would have had no teeth left. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. There was a time, and you know what, Shane? There was a time, if you were able to bite a police officer, you would probably never bite again. But look, clearly she's not held accountable. I mean, this to me just sends another message to politicians in New York City and New York State. Everybody's watching New York City through this entire country that you have status and you're part of the elites. And you know what? And no longer is Lady Justice blind. Lady Justice sees the elites and Lady Justice sees the politicians, and you can walk on water. And shame on you, Frank DiGiacomo. I think that's ridiculous. How are you a chief supporting the police department? That's not taking one for the team. You destroy the team. I hope the unions get on this one. The unions should say this is absolutely ridiculous. How can we actually support our members when we have a chief that was bitten and we're not going to prosecute and fight this tooth and nail? Are they going to stay idle? I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
You know what? I just don't understand. I don't understand the obsession with the I'm going to get a star. Let me get another star. The mayor is going to like me. I mean, like, I don't understand the obsession with it. Oh, so I could cash out my time. All right. That's what your integrity is worth. That's what your life sums up to, is whether the mayor, some clown like Bill de Blasio or Eric Adams likes you. I really like, As much as I like playing videos of Eric Adams back in the day, completely contradicting himself, I'd much rather play videos of these chiefs talking about Eric Adams. I'd much rather get the videos of these chiefs prior in the past talking about Eric Adams and what a shit cop he was, and now sitting there and doing anything he'll ask them to do. Absolutely anything. And like, to me, like, the mandate showed to me that the majority of cops will do anything for their pension. Anything. I was telling a couple of people who I'm very close with that are high up there. And I was like, dude, don't tell me right now if they tell you to come in my house and lock me up, you won't do it. You're going to do it. You're going to take my kids. You're going to throw them into a camp. Don't tell me you won't do it. You're going to do it. No, I wouldn't do it. I'm like, yeah, you would. All right. Tomorrow they pass a law and they say that you're not doing it. Well, I got to do it. All right. And that's my point. And that's my point. You're going to do whatever they tell you to do. Whether it's like, I'm sorry, Ma, you're already past your age. It is what it is. I got to send you to this camp. I got to do it. I get 3%. I could cash out my time.
Get that. You know what's funny? I used to say, and I used to tell this all the time, tell the cops, that you're a lot smarter before you become a cop than you are now when it comes to policing. Because as soon as you go to the academy, they inject you with this idiot chip, boop, and you no longer think like a normal person. But I think also something happens when these guys make chief, or they're about to make chief, other than Ron Layson and Rob Blue Cash, and for some reason they didn't get the chip. But they get injected with a chip either. Boop, and they don't think like a normal person anymore. Oh, you want to take my wife? I get a star? Yeah, okay. You're going to inject this all with something? Oh, I get a star? She's going to bite my skin and not get prosecuted? I get a star? I don't know. For some reason, Rob Blue Cash and Ron Layson, they missed that line when they had the chip. So thank God. But these other guys, I don't know what goes on. They just don't think like a normal human being anymore. It's not normal thinking. Like, this chief should be saying, are you kidding me? She bit me? What is she going to do to the cops? If she gets away with this, what is she going to do to our cops? But no. Hey, little Frank, there's a star in there for you. I don't know what that star does. It must. I don't know. I know it makes you better looking. Chief Manager knows that. It must do a lot of things.
Yeah, man. I don't know, dude. I don't know. Like that just and that's why like that knee was so symbolic to me, dude. It was like the most symbolic thing ever. It really was. I was like, it just shows exactly what happened to New York City and to really law enforcement across the country. And particularly, honestly, to males, white males in law enforcement across this country. I never seen so many people hate themselves. I've never seen so many people that hate themselves. White male cops, white male executives hate themselves, hate their children more than anything. They don't know that they do. They think they love themselves. They think they love their children, and yet they push this racist diversity, equity, and inclusion propaganda. Honestly, just to be in with the in crowd and stay in. That knee is like it's the craziest thing, man. Honestly, it honestly is, and we're still there, man. I'm going to go back to my lawsuit. Part of my lawsuit is not just a denial of my religious exemption. Part of my lawsuit is the attack on males in policing, particularly Christian males in policing. And where are any of the law enforcement agencies? Where are any of the supposed law enforcement supporters to back that? I mean, my claims are so valid, they're not even funny. I mean, they're so valid. They're right there. They're spelled out. They told you that men are more likely to do that. Like, they were trying to remove males out of policing. This is a process that they use to do it. And no one's saying a word about it. No one's saying a word about it, dude. And like, there was something in England that just popped out the other day. I posted about West Yorkshire Police Department. Chief Constable, or whatever the hell his name is, Chief Inspector Constable, whatever the hell his name is, John Robbins. He puts this policy in place, right? And the policy is this: there's only certain filing periods for the West Yorkshire Police. But if you're black or brown, you could file all year long. if you're white, you could only file during the filing period. And he's sitting there defending it, saying it's not racist. He just needs to bring up diversity in his organization, in his agency, and that positive discrimination is actually a very good thing and should be legal. Positive discrimination, Eric. So discrimination isn't bad. We could do positive discrimination. What do you think about John Robbins? A white man, by the way, probably has kids. He'll sneak them in the back door, of course, like the NYPD executives do. Don't worry, 2 years, John Robbins' kid's going to be whatever they call them, detectives in Britain, with zero experience. But what do you think about John Robbins saying? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Right. Definitely. Oh, just the knuckle draggers.
He's the knuckle dragger.
What do you think about that, though, dude? The filing period is you white guys can only file in this short window, but everybody else, because for diversity. That's not discriminatory, right?
It's so ridiculous. Why don't can we just try this with the NBA? Let's try it with the NBA. Let's see how that works out. Let's imagine that we had a DEI movement in the NBA and we decided that, from now on, 30% of all teams have to be white. What's going to happen to basketball? It's going to suck. It's going to tank. It's going to tank. But that's positive discrimination, right? Does anybody, why are there more black people in the NBA? Because it's organic and black people are just better at basketball. The overwhelming majority, there are some outliers out there, right? Like Luka and, old school Larry Bird and a couple of white guys, but the overwhelming majority of good basketball players are black. But that's, if we decided that we had to have all white guys or 30% of white guys, that would completely destroy basketball. But why don't we see this DEI infection anywhere else? This is absolutely, how is positive discrimination okay? Oh, but it's positive. If I was a black guy, I'd be, first of all, I'd be insulted. What, you think that I can't do the paperwork in time? I can't follow instructions and follow orders and do it in the right window? Is absolutely ridiculous. I think that's what we should do. Let's take the NBA, let's take the NFL, and let's do a 30 for 30. By 2030, let's have 30% females in the NFL. By 2030, let's have more white guys in the NBA. And what's going to happen? You know why they're not doing it? Because they're going to lose money. Who's going to watch basketball if it's all a bunch of white guys? Look, if we look at the 50s and 60s, where it's predominantly white, there were a lot of good ball players, but look how the game has evolved. And it's predominantly black. Better ball players. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, dude. So I posted this and I'm like, and everyone's like, oh, this is crazy. And I'm like, is it? I'm like, this is the NYPD's diversity, equity, inclusion policy. Did you ever read that? This is no different to me than this. Everyone's like, oh, this is nuts. I'm like, really? No, it's not. Because I watch white chiefs, I watch white police commissioners do this same exact thing for the last decade. Not only in the NYPD, in every major big city across America. So, but yes, particularly in the NYPD. I'm like, this policy is nothing. So according to the West Yorkshire Police, it's not racist to positively discriminate. The Telegraph recently published an article detailing how white candidates can only apply during filing periods, while those underrepresented can apply all year round. The Telegraph also published a 2023 quote from Chief Constable John Robbins, a white man and head of the Yorkshire Police, where he stated, "I think the time has come that legislation should change so that we should use positive discrimination." Yes, let's discriminate. Good job. Good job, John. Now, in a recently released statement, so this comes from the West Yorkshire Police. This is what they said. I got this from the West Yorkshire Police, okay? West Yorkshire Police are defending the practice of opening up an application period where only underrepresented candidates may apply by stating, you ready? This was the statement. Positive action allows people from underrepresented groups who expressed an interest in joining the force to complete an application, which is then held on file until a recruitment window is open. No interviews are held until the window is officially opened to all candidates, enabling people from the underrepresented groups to apply early does not give them an advantage in the application process. It simply provides us with more opportunity to attract talent from that pool of candidates. So they're defending this by saying, well, you're not getting placed ahead. And literally nobody believes that because you just told the white guys they can't apply during the same period. So no one's going to believe you. So a prime minister, a very short-serving prime minister, Liz Truss, listen to what she says. This is a quote from her. Britain has a serious problem with police leadership being ideologically captured and pursuing anti-white discrimination. So that quote from Liz Truss, I'm just going to redo right now, and I'm going to say New York City and the rest of major American city police departments have a serious problem with police leadership being ideologically captured and pursuing anti-white and anti-male discrimination.
Spot on, spot on. Listen, that's why we say it all the time. I mean, Maul and I both say this. This is not just a problem in the U.S. This is a global as a problem. If we don't get a handle on this, the whole world is going to be affected. That's why I say it's diversity, diversity, equity, and infection. That's what it's infecting everything. This is absolutely ridiculous. That was spot on, brother. That was good. You're absolutely right. What's going on there mirrors what's going on in the States. What's going on in the States mirrors what's going on there. We see it in the entire world right now, except for a few places that haven't caught on right now. But this is just absolutely ridiculous. More discrimination. There is no positive discrimination. There's no such thing as reverse discrimination. It's just discrimination. That's it. You either discriminate or you don't.
Sick, bro. All right. Anything else before we get out of here? We went a little long today, bro.
I know. I realized it too because I realized I'm like, wow, it's a half hour ago, and I was trying to acknowledge the time. But hey, listen, 2 hours and 40 minutes into it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Great comments. I like this one here by Pat Donahue. Pat's on fire today. Pat said if the NBA, I can't find it, but basically said if the NBA was all white guys, he would win right now in DraftKings. So good luck with that. Could you imagine though? Listen, thank God for Larry Bird and Luka, but for the most part, it's not a bunch of great white basketball players out there. Could you imagine from now on? Really?
I just want to see the talent, dude. That's it. I just want to see the talent. I just want to watch people that are enjoyable to play. Like, you know, I started watching the WNBA last year, and I started watching college women's basketball. And, you know, I'm not going to lie. It was because of Caitlin Clark, and it wasn't because she's white. It's just because she's enjoyable to watch. You know, like when I was watching Caitlin Clark, it reminded me of watching Allen Iverson in college. It reminded me of watching Kevin Durant in college. There was just something different about them. You could just see something different when they were on the court compared to everybody else. And you know, everyone like took aim at her race. And I'm like, has nothing to do with her race. I don't care. I watch basketball. I like talent. I don't care if you're black, if you're white, you know, and the whole racist claim is laughable. I'm like, you know, and like, especially in our generation, dude, because I think so many white kids grew up idolizing Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, all of these black athletes, Bo Jackson. And it's like idolizing them, literally pictures on the wall, buying their sneakers, wearing their jerseys. And like, you're demonizing that generation as a racist generation.
I
don't know, man. Okay.
I would argue that more white kids listen to rap than black kids. I mean, I grew up, all the white kids listen to rap.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole push of racism is just nonsense.
Sick.
Right? Right or wrong? I mean, listen, I grew up, all the white kids would listen to Wu-Tang, including myself, more than the black kids. So I grew up in a black neighborhood, so I knew. So this whole racist ideology is total BS. It's all bullshit. But listen, 2 hours and 45 minutes into it. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much. You heard it here, the Finance Unfiltered. We'll be back Wednesday morning, of course, 8:05 live. Tomorrow, we'll have Sal on 12:05 or maybe 13:05. We're playing around with that. He'll be live again. And Wednesday, look out for the Executive Perspective. These guys do a hell of a job. They spend their whole week putting some great production together. So, and we'll stay tuned. We'll have some new shows coming soon also. So, this channel is really building. And part of this channel, really what's unique and I think is special is our audience, our friends, our listeners. You're very important. You engage. Without you, we can't have the show also. So And as John said earlier, we are looking to possibly having a call-in, figure out how to get that going. If we could have you call in, I think that'd be great. I can assume right now, if Pat Donahue could call, we'll probably just hear some heavy breathing.
I'm blocking Pat Donahue's number. He can't.
After that Irish boss statement, yeah, I think he's gonna get you.
It's gonna be heavy screening, Pat. You're gonna be on the no call list.
You're gonna have Patrick on the phone. Are you on a treadmill or something? But yeah. Listen, everybody, thank you so much. John, always a pleasure. 2 hours, 45 minutes. John, close us out, brother.
Yeah, no, that's it, guys. I think you said everything. We'll be back at you. Thank everybody for joining. Find us Unfiltered. We'll be back at you tomorrow, 12:05 or 13:05. Stay tuned.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888-901-BLUE. That's 888-901-BLUE.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?